The first time I noticed something was wrong was during Sunday dinner. My mother-in-law Paris had just finished criticizing my pot roast when I caught my husband's reflection in the dining room mirror. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking through me, like I was already gone. My name is Celeste, and I'm a trauma therapist. I should have seen the signs earlier, but love has a way of blinding even the most trained eyes. The meat's overcooked, Paris announced, dabbing her mouth with a napkin. Caden, darling, remember how I used to make it for you? So tender it would fall off the bone? I watched my 6-year-old daughter Remington push her food around her plate. I like Mommy's cooking, she whispered. Of course you do, sweetheart. Paris reached across the table to pat her hand. But you're too young to know better. I gripped my fork tighter. Paris, please don't. Celeste, Caden cut in, his voice carrying that new edge I'd been hearing lately. Mom's just trying to help. Help with what? Undermining me in front of our daughter? Paris clicked her tongue. Dear, you're being paranoid again. Caden, have you noticed she's been more sensitive lately? The word paranoid hung in the air like smoke. I pushed back from the table. I need some air. Mommy? Remington's voice trembled. It's okay, baby. Finish your dinner. I'll be right back. I stepped onto our back porch, the summer air thick with humidity. Through the kitchen window, I could hear their muffled voices. I moved closer, not proud of eavesdropping, but driven by something I couldn't name. Getting worse, Paris was saying. The outbursts, the paranoia. I know, Mom. Caden's voice was heavy. The plan is in motion. We just need to be patient. And you're sure about this? What choice do we have? It's for Remington's sake. My hands started shaking. Plan? What plan? I pressed closer to the window, but they'd lowered their voices further. Later that night, after tucking Remington in, I found Caden in our bedroom, typing on his laptop. We need to talk, I said. He didn't look up. About? About whatever you and your mother are planning. His fingers stilled on the keyboard. What are you talking about? I heard you, through the window. You said something about a plan. Caden finally met my eyes, his expression concerned. Honey, we weren't talking about any plan. Are you feeling okay? Don't do that. Don't make me question what I heard with my own ears. He stood up, approaching me slowly like I was a spooked animal. This is exactly what Mom and I were worried about. These paranoid thoughts. Stop saying that word. Which word? Paranoid? Celeste, you're shouting. Was I? I hadn't realized. I lowered my voice. I know what I heard. You heard wrong. He placed his hands on my shoulders. Maybe you should call Dr. Martinez tomorrow. It's been a while since your last checkup. I don't need a checkup. I need my husband to be honest with me. I am being honest. His voice was gentle, reasonable, too reasonable. You're not well, Celeste. You haven't been for a while. I stepped back from his touch. I'm perfectly fine. Then why are you imagining conspiracies? Why are you attacking my mother? Why can't you see we're trying to help? Something cold settled in my stomach. I never said anything about conspiracies. A flash of something, frustration, worry, crossed his face before it smoothed back to concern. You should get some rest. We can talk more tomorrow. I lay awake that night, listening to Caden's steady breathing beside me. My mind kept replaying the conversation I'd overheard, his denial, the way Paris looked at me during dinner. Something was wrong. Very wrong. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from Caden, which made no sense. He was right next to me, asleep. I opened it. Don't trust what you see. They're watching. I sat up, heart pounding. Caden? He stirred. What's wrong? I showed him my phone. Did you send this? He squinted at the screen. There's no text there, Celeste. The screen is blank. But I could see it clearly. Don't trust what you see. They're watching. It's right there, I insisted, my voice rising. How can you not see it? He sat up, fully awake now. I think we need to call Dr. Martinez right now. I looked back at my phone. The text was gone. No trace of it in my message history, but I had seen it. I know I had. Hadn't I? The emergency room's fluorescent lights made everything look harsh and unreal. I sat on the edge of an examination bed while a nurse named Sophia checked my vitals. "Blood pressure's a bit high," she said kindly, unwrapping the cuff from my arm. "But that's understandable given the circumstances." "I'm not crazy," I told her. The text was real. "Nobody's saying you're crazy." She smiled, and something about her gentle demeanor made me want to trust her. Sometimes stress can manifest in unexpected ways. Caden paced near the door, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, Mother. We're still waiting for the doctor." "No, she's not violent, just confused." "Of course you should bring Remington here. She needs her mother." I wanted to scream that I wasn't confused, but my protests were starting to sound hollow even to my own ears. The text had vanished. Just like the strange noises I'd been hearing at night, the shadows I'd seen moving in our hallway, and the mysterious notes I'd found in my office drawer warning me about Caden. Dr. Martinez arrived, looking concerned. "Celeste, Caden tells me you've been experiencing some disturbing symptoms." "They're not symptoms," I insisted. "Something's happening. Someone's trying to—" A commotion in the hallway cut me off. Paris burst in with Remington, who ran straight to me. "Mommy, Grandma says you're sick." I hugged her tight. "I'm fine, baby. Everything's fine." "Remington, darling," Paris cooed. "Why don't you come sit with Grandma while the doctor talks to Mommy?" "No!" I held my daughter tighter. "She stays with me." Dr. Martinez cleared his throat. "Perhaps it would be better if we could speak privately." Sophia stepped forward. "I can take her to the children's area. We have coloring books." Remington's face lit up. "Can I, Mommy?" I reluctantly let her go, watching as Sophia led her away. The nurse turned back briefly, giving me a reassuring nod. "Now," Dr. Martinez said, "tell me about these messages you've been receiving." "They're warnings," I explained, "about Caden and Paris, but every time I try to show someone, they disappear." "And the shadows in your hallway?" "They're real. I recorded them on my phone, but the video was corrupted," Caden finished. "Just like the last 3 times." Dr. Martinez made notes on his tablet. "And how long has this been going on?" "About 2 weeks," I said. "Ever since I overheard—" A crash from the hallway interrupted me. I jumped up and ran to the door, but there was nothing there. No broken glass, no fallen equipment, just empty corridor. "I heard it!" I spun around. "You all must have heard it!" Paris pressed a hand to her chest. "Darling, there was no crash." "Stop it! Stop making me question everything!" I grabbed Caden's arm. "You know something's wrong. Tell them about the plan you discussed with your mother." "Celeste," he said softly, "we're worried about you. These delusions—" "They're not delusions." My shout echoed through the room. Dr. Martinez exchanged glances with Caden, who nodded grimly. "I think," the doctor said, "we need to consider immediate intervention." "What does that mean?" But I knew. God help me, I knew. "There's a bed available in our psychiatric ward, just for a few days, to help you stabilize." "No." I backed away. "No, you can't do this, Caden, please." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's for the best, honey. For you and for Remington." "Remington—" I looked around wildly. "Where is she? I need to see her." Paris stepped between me and the door. "She's safe with the nurse. You're in no condition." "Get out of my way." I tried to push past her, but hands grabbed me from behind. Hospital security, summoned by some silent signal. "This is for your own good," Paris said, her voice dripping with false concern. "You'll thank us later." I fought against the hands holding me. "Caden, don't let them do this." He stood there, face twisted with what looked like genuine anguish. "I'm sorry, Celeste. I love you, but you need help." "No, I need my daughter! Remington! Remington!" A sharp prick in my arm, and the world started to blur. The last thing I saw was Sophia in the doorway, holding my crying daughter, her face filled with something that looked less like professional concern and more like real worry. Then darkness took me, and with it, my last chance to protect my little girl from whatever they had planned. The psychiatric ward was quieter than I expected. No screaming, no chaos. Just the soft squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum and the distant hum of fluorescent lights. I'd been here 3 days when I met Louisa. She sat next to me during group therapy, her silver hair neatly styled, despite being in a hospital gown like the rest of us. While others shared their stories, she studied me with sharp blue eyes. "You don't belong here," she whispered when the therapist wasn't looking. I turned to her, startled. "What?" "Your eyes, they're too clear, too focused." She patted my hand. "Come sit with me at lunch." Later in the cafeteria, Sophia appeared with our trays. She'd transferred to the psychiatric ward the same day I was admitted, a coincidence that felt less random by the minute. "How are you holding up?" she asked, lingering at our table longer than necessary. "Have you seen my daughter? Is she okay?" Sophia glanced around before lowering her voice. "She asks about you every time they visit. She misses you." "They're still letting him have custody?" Louisa interrupted, her voice sharp. "Who are you?" I asked. "Really?" Louisa stirred her soup. "Former family court judge, retired last year. Then my son decided I was unstable after I questioned his wife's drinking habits around my grandchildren." She smiled grimly. "Amazing how quickly they can make you disappear when they want to." My hands started shaking. "They're going to take her from me permanently, aren't they?" "Not if we can help it," Sophia said, then quickly moved away as another nurse approached. Louisa waited until we were alone again. "Tell me everything. Start with when you first suspected something was wrong." I did. The overheard conversation, the vanishing messages, the gaslighting. With each detail, Louisa's frown deepened. "Classic isolation tactics," she said. "They're building a case against you. Every time you react to their manipulations, you look more unstable." "But how? Caden's a lawyer, not a—" "A lawyer?" Louisa leaned forward. "What kind?" "Family law. He specializes in custody cases." "Of course he does." She shook her head. "He knows exactly how to work the system." A commotion near the nurse's station caught our attention. A patient was arguing about phone privileges. In the chaos, Sophia appeared again, pressing something into my hand as she passed. "Computer room. 10 minutes," she whispered. I looked down. A small piece of paper with login credentials. The computer room was monitored, but not heavily supervised. When my scheduled time came, I sat at the furthest terminal and logged into my cloud account, using the credentials Sophia had given me. "What are we looking for?" Louisa asked, pretending to read a magazine nearby. "Anything, everything." My fingers flew over the keyboard. Emails, photos, voice messages. I stopped. There, in my archived voicemails, was a folder I didn't recognize. Inside were dozens of recordings from the past 6 months. "Headphones!" Louisa hissed, sliding a pair across the desk. I plugged them in and clicked play. "Caden, baby, when are you going to tell her?" A woman's voice, unfamiliar. "Your mother says everything's ready." Next message. "The papers are filed. Once she's committed, custody will be automatic. Paris has the judge in her pocket." Message after message, each one more damning than the last. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely operate the mouse. "Save them," Louisa urged. "Quick, before—" "Time's up," the computer room supervisor called out. "Everyone out." I frantically forwarded the messages to an email address I'd memorized years ago. My best friend Hannah, a lawyer who'd helped with my custody agreements before. That night, I lay in my narrow bed, staring at the ceiling while other patients slept. Sophia appeared during her rounds. "Did you find what you needed?" she whispered. "Why are you helping me?" She hesitated. "Because 6 months ago, my sister lost her kids the same way. Different players, same game." She squeezed my hand. "Some of us are still fighting for her. I need to get out of here." "You will, but you have to be smart, play their game, take your meds, go to therapy, act compliant. The more stable you appear, the harder it'll be for them to keep you here." "While they're out there with my daughter?" "Trust me," Louisa's voice came from the next bed. "The quieter you are, the louder those voicemails will speak." A door opened down the hall. Sophia quickly moved on, maintaining her rounds. "Louisa?" I whispered into the darkness. "Yes?" "Thank you, both of you." Don't thank us yet. Her voice was steel in the darkness. Thank us when you're holding your daughter again. Now rest. Tomorrow, we start planning your resurrection. I closed my eyes, but not to sleep. Behind my eyelids, I could see it all playing out. The courtroom, the evidence, the look on Caden's face when he realized his own game had been turned against him. Soon, I promised myself. Soon. Back in the computer room, I dug deeper into the voicemails. Each one felt like a knife twisting in my chest, but I couldn't stop listening. Caden, I miss you, a woman purred. Paris says we can go public once everything's finalized. I recognized the voice now. Michaela, a legal assistant from Caden's firm. The pieces were falling into place. Found something interesting? Louisa appeared behind me, right as a new message started playing. Mother, I can't do this anymore, Caden's voice cracked through the speakers. The way Celeste looks at me, she trusts me completely. Don't go soft now, Paris snapped. Remember what's at stake. The firm's reputation, our family's future. That woman is poison, just like your father said about me before I dealt with him. I yanked the headphones off. Did she just... Keep listening, Louisa urged, and keep forwarding everything to Hannah. The next message made my blood run cold. The offshore accounts are ready, Paris said. Once we have custody of Remington, we'll transfer everything. The girls' trust fund, the firm's assets. Celeste won't be able to touch any of it from the institution. My hands shook as I typed a quick email to Hannah. Financial fraud. Check Paris's accounts. Something about Caden's father. Careful, Sophia appeared, pretending to check the computers. Dr. Martinez is doing rounds early today. I clicked through more files frantically. Photos appeared. Caden and Michaela together at a hotel, date stamps from months ago. Paris at a bank I didn't recognize, carrying documents. A statement showing millions in transfers to a Cayman Islands account. Oh God, I whispered. They're not just taking Remington. They're stealing everything. Download it all, Louisa said. Every last... My elbow hit the mouse. A window popped up. Email sent successfully to Caden Wilkinson. My heart stopped. No. What happened? Sophia rushed over. I accidentally... The evidence. I sent it to him. All of it? Just the photos, but he'll know now. He'll know I found out. Sophia grabbed my arm. We need to get you out of here. Today. How? Leave that to me, Louisa said. But first, forward everything else to Hannah. Now. My fingers flew over the keyboard, sending file after file. Behind us, voices approached the computer room. Dr. Martinez is coming, Sophia warned. Act normal. I quickly closed everything and opened a generic wellness website just as the doctor entered. Celeste, he smiled. How are you feeling today? Much better. I forced myself to smile back. The medications are really helping. Excellent. Your husband called this morning. He's very concerned about you. My stomach churned. Is he coming to visit? This afternoon, actually. He has some papers for you to sign. Papers. Of course. After Dr. Martinez left, Sophia pulled me aside. Don't sign anything, no matter what they say. They'll force me to. No, Louisa joined us. They won't, because in exactly 2 hours, you're having a medical emergency. Sophia nodded. Food allergy. Very unfortunate. We'll have to transfer you to the main hospital for treatment. But I don't have any food allergies. Louisa pressed something into my hand. You do today. Sophia knows the signs to look for. Once you're in the ER, Hannah will be waiting. I looked at the small pill in my palm. Will this hurt me? Just some very convincing hives and swelling, Sophia assured me. Nothing dangerous. I'll be with you the whole time. Why are you risking your job for me? Because I took an oath to help people, she said fiercely. Not to help imprison them. A commotion erupted in the hallway. Through the window, I saw Caden striding toward the nurse's station, hours ahead of schedule. Paris was with him. He knows, I whispered. He got the email. Now or never, Louisa said. Take the pill. I stared at Caden through the window. His face was twisted with anger as he argued with the staff. Paris stood behind him, her expression calculating as she surveyed the ward. For a moment, I remembered how it felt to love him, to trust him, to believe we'd grow old together, watching Remington grow up. Then I thought of the voicemails, the photos, the offshore accounts. I swallowed the pill. "How long?" I asked. 10 minutes, Sophia said. "When it hits, make it dramatic." I watched Caden getting closer to the computer room, his eyes scanning for me. "Louisa," I whispered, "if anything happens." "Nothing will happen," she squeezed my hand, "except justice." I felt the first tingles of the pill taking effect just as Caden reached for the door handle. Game on. The emergency room lights were just as harsh as I remembered. My face was still swollen, but the worst of the allergic reaction had passed. Sophia had played her part perfectly, ensuring I was transferred before Caden could get to me. "Your friend Hannah is on her way," she whispered, adjusting my IV. "Just keep stalling." The curtain yanked open. Caden stood there, his tie loosened and hair disheveled. "Leave us," he told Sophia. "Hospital policy requires, leave us." Sophia glanced at me. I nodded slightly and she stepped out, but I knew she wouldn't go far. "What did you find?" Caden's voice was low, dangerous. "Everything." He ran his hands through his hair. "It's not what you think." "Really? Because I think you're having an affair with Michaela while your mother embezzles millions." His face went white. "You don't understand." "Then explain it to me." I sat up, ignoring the dizziness. "Explain why my husband is trying to lock me away and steal my daughter." "I'm trying to protect you." "From what?" "From her." He collapsed into the chair beside my bed. "From my mother. From what she's capable of." I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" "My father." His voice cracked. She didn't just deal with him. She killed him." The monitor beside me beeped faster. "What?" "Insurance money. Just like now with the firm's accounts. She's been planning this for years. When you started asking questions about the family finances, so you decided to help her commit me, to protect me? You don't know what she threatened to do." He grabbed my hand. I yanked it away. "To you, to Remington. Don't you dare say her name." "Celeste, please. The affair with Michaela, it was my mother's idea. To build the case against you. I never wanted, but you did it anyway." My voice was ice. "You chose her over us. I chose survival. You think I wanted any of this? The photos, the fake messages, the gaslighting?" "The messages weren't fake?" He froze. "What messages?" "The ones in my cloud account, the voicemails." His face changed. "What voicemails?" The curtain moved. Paris stood there, her expression murderous. "You stupid boy," she spat. "You've said too much." "Mother, be quiet," she turned to me. "Where are the recordings?" "Safe," I said, like I should have kept my family. "Your family?" She laughed. "You were never family, just a means to an end. The firm needed Remington's trust fund to cover the losses, and you were in the way." "Mother, stop." Caden stood up. "Why? She knows everything now, thanks to your weakness." She pulled something from her purse, a syringe. "Unfortunately, allergic reactions can be so unpredictable." "Security!" Sophia's voice rang out. "Code Gray!" Everything happened at once. Paris lunged forward. Caden grabbed her arm. The syringe went flying. Security officers flooded the room. "She tried to kill me!" Paris screamed, pointing at me. "She's delusional, violent." "Nice try," Hannah's voice cut through the chaos. She stood in the doorway, holding up her phone. "But I just recorded everything you said, about the trust fund, the firm's losses, and what really happened to your husband." Paris went still. "You have no proof." "Actually," I said, "we have every proof. The voicemails, the financial records, the offshore accounts. It's all with the FBI now." "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I looked at Caden. "Tell her. Tell her what happens when you cross a trauma therapist who specializes in gathering and documenting evidence." Caden's shoulders slumped. "It's over, Mother." Paris lunged for the door, but security was faster. As they led her away, her screams echoed down the hallway. "Caden," I said quietly, Get out. Celeste, get out. Hannah has the divorce papers ready, along with a restraining order. What about Remington? You lost the right to ask about her the moment you chose your mother over her safety. He stood there, broken and defeated. I did love you, both of you. Love without protection is just another word for betrayal. After he left, Hannah sat beside me. You okay? No. I looked at Sophia, who was checking my vitals again. But I will be. Where's my daughter? Safe with my sister, Sophia said, ready to see her mom. And Paris? Hannah smiled grimly. Won't be seeing anyone for a very long time. The FBI is very interested in what happened to her husband. I closed my eyes, exhausted but relieved. I want to go home. Soon, Sophia promised. But first, there's someone else who wants to see you. Louisa appeared, looking elegant even in her hospital gown. Ready to get our lives back? I nodded, thinking of Remington's smile, of home, of freedom. More than ready. The police station's interview room was cold, but I barely noticed. Detective Morris slid another photo across the table. Paris, 20 years younger, standing next to her husband. Tell me again what made you suspicious, she said. The voicemail. She mentioned dealing with Caden's father the same way she planned to deal with me. Hannah squeezed my hand under the table as Morris played the recording. Paris's voice filled the room. The firm's reputation, our family's future, that woman is poison, just like your father said about me before I dealt with him. We've reopened the investigation into Robert Wilkinson's death, Morris said. The accident never sat right with the department. Did Caden know? I asked. About his father? We're still questioning him, but this morning, we found something interesting. She produced another photo. Recognize this? It showed a young woman, maybe 20, with familiar features. She looks like Paris. Her sister, Margaret, disappeared 30 years ago after threatening to expose Paris's first financial scheme. My stomach churned. First? Paris has a pattern. Marriage, embezzlement, convenient accidents. Your husband wasn't just protecting you from threats. He was protecting you from history repeating itself. That doesn't excuse what he did. No, Morris agreed, but it might help explain it. After the interview, Hannah drove me to her office. Louisa was waiting, now dressed in a sharp business suit. The judge granted your emergency custody order, she announced. Remington stays with you. What about Caden? Supervised visitation only, after psychiatric evaluation. She paused. He's cooperating fully with the investigation. He's trying to save himself, I said bitterly. Maybe. Louisa sat beside me. Or maybe he's finally choosing the right side. Too late. Is it? She pulled out a folder. These are Paris's psychiatric records from 1985. Her first hospitalization was after her father died. Another convenient accident. I opened the folder. Reports of abuse, trauma, diagnosed personality disorders, a cycle of violence spanning generations. She was a victim once too, Louisa said softly. Don't. I closed the folder. Don't make me feel sorry for her. Understanding isn't the same as forgiving. Hannah's phone buzzed. Sophia's here with Remington. My heart leaped. Moments later, my daughter burst through the door. Mommy! I caught her in my arms, breathing in her familiar scent. Baby, I missed you so much. Are you better now? Daddy said you were sick. I was never sick, sweetheart, but everything's okay now. She pulled back, her small face serious. Is Grandma in trouble? Daddy was crying about her. My throat tightened. Yes, she is. And Daddy made some mistakes. Is he in trouble too? That's complicated. Like when I broke your necklace and felt bad but couldn't fix it? I almost laughed at her simple wisdom. Something like that? Sophia cleared her throat. Remington, why don't we get some hot chocolate while your mom talks to her friends? After they left, I slumped in my chair. How do I explain any of this to her? With time, Louisa said, and truth. She's stronger than you think. Like her mother, Hannah added. My phone lit up with a text from Caden. I know sorry isn't enough, but I'm telling them everything. About mother, about father, about Margaret. Whatever happens to me, Remington deserves the truth. He's right about that much, Louisa said, reading over my shoulder. Truth is the first step toward healing. I don't want to heal with him. No, but maybe you need to heal for yourself, for Remington. I thought about Paris's psychiatric records, about cycles of abuse and trauma, passing from parent to child like a toxic inheritance. How do I break the cycle? I whispered. You already have, Louisa said firmly. By fighting back, by choosing truth over fear. Hannah nodded. And by showing Remington that love doesn't mean accepting abuse. Through the office window, I could see my daughter in the break room, laughing as Sophia helped her add marshmallows to her hot chocolate. She was safe. She was loved. She would grow up knowing the difference between protection and control. I want to see those records again, I said. All of them, Paris's history, the previous cases, everything. Why? Hannah asked. Because understanding isn't the same as forgiving. I met Louisa's knowing gaze. But maybe it's the first step toward making sure this never happens again. She smiled. Now that sounds like the trauma therapist I met in the ward. No, I said, watching Remington's carefree smile. That sounds like a mother who's ready to turn poison into medicine. The courtroom felt smaller than I remembered. I smoothed my skirt, fighting the urge to look back at Remington, who sat with Sophia in the gallery. Today would determine everything. All rise, the bailiff called. Judge Reynolds entered, her expression unreadable. I'd been before her dozens of times as an expert witness in trauma cases. Now I was the one being judged. Be seated, she said. Let's begin with the custody petition. Hannah stood. Your Honor, we have extensive evidence of the conspiracy against my client, including financial records, recorded conversations, and witness testimony. Objection, Caden's lawyer interrupted. My client has already admitted his role and is cooperating with authorities. This hearing is about the child's best interests. Agreed, Reynolds said. Ms. Hannah, proceed with custody arguments only. The next hour was a blur of testimonies. Sophia described my interactions with Remington during supervised visits. Louisa spoke about her observations of my mental state and stability. Detective Morris confirmed that I had been the victim, not the perpetrator, of a complex scheme. Then Caden took the stand. I failed as a husband and father, he said, his voice rough. I chose fear over love, compliance over courage. But please, don't take my daughter away completely. You helped commit her mother to a psychiatric facility under false pretenses, Hannah reminded him. How can she ever trust you with their child? I can't undo what I did. He looked directly at me. But I'm in therapy now. Real therapy, not the kind my mother... He swallowed hard. I'm learning about generational trauma, about the patterns I repeated. I want to break that cycle for Remington. By testifying against your mother? Hannah pressed. Yes. By telling the truth, finally. About Father's death. About Aunt Margaret. About everything. Judge Reynolds leaned forward. Mr. Caden, are you saying you knew about these crimes before? I suspected, but I was a child when Father died. Mother convinced me it was an accident, that everyone was against us, that we had to protect each other. His voice cracked. I became what she made me. That's not an excuse, I said, unable to stay silent. No, he agreed. It's not. But it's why I'm asking for a chance to be better, to show Remington that people can change, that mistakes can be admitted, that truth matters more than pride. The judge turned to me. Ms. Celeste, you've requested sole custody with no visitation. I stood, my legs shaking. Yes, Your Honor, initially. Initially? I took a deep breath. As a trauma therapist, I've seen what happens when children are cut off from parents who are genuinely trying to change. It can create new wounds while trying to heal old ones. Caden's head snapped up. I'm not saying I forgive him, I continued, but Remington loves her father. If he's serious about therapy, about breaking the cycle, I'm willing to consider supervised visitation, eventually. Objection, his lawyer stood. We're requesting joint custody. Overruled, Reynolds cut in. Continue, Ms. Celeste. My daughter deserves to see that accountability matters. That change is possible, but she also deserves to feel completely safe. I turned to Caden. Prove you can be trusted. Not to me, to her. Judge Reynolds nodded slowly. I've reviewed all the evidence, including the pending criminal charges against Paris and the FBI's ongoing investigation. My ruling is as follows. The courtroom held its breath. Sole physical and legal custody is granted to Celeste. Mr. Caden will have supervised visitation twice monthly, contingent upon continuing therapy and compliance with all criminal proceedings. After 6 months, the court will review this arrangement based on progress reports from all parties. I sagged in relief as she continued. Furthermore, Mr. Caden will maintain his cooperation with authorities regarding Paris's crimes. Any contact with his mother will result in immediate termination of visitation rights. Thank you, Your Honor, Caden said quietly. Don't thank me, she replied. Thank your wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, for understanding that healing is more complicated than punishment. After the ruling, I found Remington in the hallway with Sophia. Is Daddy still my daddy? She asked. I knelt before her. Yes, baby. You'll see him sometimes with Ms. Sophia there to help. Because he made bad choices? Yes, but he's trying to make better ones now. She considered this with 6-year-old gravity. Like when I learned from my mistakes? Exactly like that. Caden approached cautiously. Can I say goodbye? I nodded, stepping back as he hugged our daughter. I love you, Remington, he whispered. I'm going to work very hard to be a better daddy. Promise? I promise, and no more lies, ever. She hugged him back. Okay. Later, Hannah found me in her office, staring at Paris's file. Second thoughts? No. I closed the folder. Just thinking about cycles, how they end. They end with choice, Louisa said from the doorway. You chose truth. Caden chose accountability. Even Remington is choosing forgiveness, in her own way. And Paris? She chose to stay trapped. That's on her, not you. I nodded, gathering my things. My daughter was waiting. It was time to go home and start our new chapter. The autumn breeze rustled through the therapy garden as I watched Remington plant bulbs with Sophia. Each one represented a session, a small piece of healing buried deep to bloom later. Yellow ones are for happy days, Remington explained to her father, who sat on a nearby bench. Purple are for sad days. When they all grow, it'll be a feelings garden. Caden nodded, his supervised visit almost over. That's beautiful, sweetheart, just like you. Ms. Sophia says flowers don't rush. They grow when they're ready. I smiled, remembering when Sophia suggested this project. She'd left the hospital to start a family therapy practice, focusing on children affected by domestic manipulation. Remington was her first success story. Time to wrap up, Sophia called gently. Remington hugged her father goodbye. As she skipped inside to wash her hands, Caden approached me. The FBI finished questioning Mother today, he said. And? They found Margaret's remains, where Mother said they would. He rubbed his face. The prosecutor's offering a deal in exchange for her confession to Father's murder. Will she take it? She already did, along with a full psychiatric evaluation. I absorbed this, thinking of the cycles we'd broken, the truths we'd unearthed. Good. Celeste? His voice was hesitant. Thank you for not keeping Remington from me completely, for giving me a chance to change. I didn't do it for you. I know. That's why it means so much. The door opened and Louisa emerged, elegant as ever in her judge's robes. She'd been reinstated after her son's scheme was exposed, and now specialized in family court cases involving psychological manipulation. The garden's coming along nicely, she observed. Purple and yellow, I said, sad and happy. Just like life should be. Real, not perfect. Hannah's car pulled up to the curb. She'd been handling the final dissolution of the firm's assets, ensuring everything was properly restored to its rightful owners. The trust fund's secure, she announced, joining us, and I brought something else. She handed me an envelope. Your reinstatement papers. The medical board cleared everything. I touched the envelope, thinking of my trauma therapy practice, of all the people I could help now with my newfound understanding. Will you see clients here? Caden asked. In the garden? Some. Sophia and I are starting a support group for families affected by generational abuse. The garden will be part of their healing space. Like my feelings flowers, Remington returned, hands clean and damp. Exactly like that, baby. Caden checked his watch. I should go. My therapy appointment. Dad? Remington tugged his sleeve. Will you help plant more bulbs next time? He looked at me questioningly. I nodded. As long as you keep doing the work, I said. I will, I promise. After he left, Remington helped me gather the gardening tools. Mommy, are you still sad about Daddy's bad choices? Sometimes, but I'm proud of his good choices now. Like telling the truth about Grandma? Yes, and like getting help to be better. She considered this, her face serious. Can we plant some orange bulbs next time? What do orange ones mean? Ms. Sophia says orange is for brave days, when we do hard things that help us grow. Louisa chuckled. Smart woman, that Sophia. Orange it is, I agreed. We'll plant them together. Hannah helped Remington carry the tools inside while Louisa lingered in the garden. You know, she said, when I met you in that ward, I never imagined we'd end up here. Running a therapy garden? Building something beautiful from something broken? Inside, I could hear Remington laughing with Sophia, probably planning their next session. Hannah was on the phone, likely handling the last details of Paris's case. Everything was different now, but somehow more real than before. The flowers will bloom in spring, I said. Yes. Louisa squeezed my hand. And so will you. I looked at the freshly turned earth, the tiny markers showing where each bulb waited beneath the surface. Yellow for joy, purple for sorrow, orange for courage. A garden of truth, growing one day at a time. Come on, I said. Let's go see what other colors we can add. We walked inside together, leaving the autumn breeze to whisper through the garden. Somewhere beneath the soil, roots were already reaching out, growing stronger, preparing to break through to the light. Just like us. Just like love, just like truth.
Growing up in our modest two-story house, I learned early on that my sister Lisa was different. Special, as my parents would say. I was 6 when she was born, and from the very beginning, everything in our household revolved around her delicate health. Sarah, close that window right now, Mom would shout from downstairs. Your sister might catch a cold. This was the soundtrack of my childhood, a constant reminder that Lisa's well-being was everyone's primary concern. I remember the first time I really understood how different our roles would be. I was 12, and Lisa had just started elementary school. She came home one day with a runny nose, nothing serious, but you'd think she had pneumonia from how my parents reacted. This is your fault, Sarah, Dad's words cut through me like a knife. You must have left the door open too long when you went to school this morning. I wanted to argue that Lisa had probably caught it from one of her classmates, like any normal kid would, but I knew better than to speak up. Instead, I just nodded and accepted my punishment of being grounded for the weekend. That same year, Mom started delegating household chores. While other kids my age were playing after school, I was learning how to properly dust furniture, vacuum carpets, and even do laundry. But Mom, why doesn't Lisa have to help? I asked one day, watching my sister sprawled on the couch watching TV while I folded what felt like mountains of clothes. Mom's response was quick and sharp. Your sister has a weak immune system, Sarah. The doctors say she shouldn't overexert herself. Besides, you're so good at these things already. That became the pattern of our lives. If something needed doing, I did it. If something went wrong, it was my fault. When Lisa got a D in math in 4th grade, Dad grounded me for a week because I should have helped her study better. When she broke Mom's favorite coffee mug, somehow it was because I should have been watching her more carefully. I remember one particularly frustrating incident when Lisa was 10 and I was 16. She had taken my favorite sweater without asking and spilled juice all over it. When I complained to Mom, she just sighed and said, Sarah, you should have put it somewhere she couldn't reach it. You know how careless she can be." That was the moment I started dreaming about college, about escape. I threw myself into my studies, knowing that education was my ticket to freedom. Every time I felt overwhelmed by the unfairness at home, I channeled that energy into my schoolwork. My teachers noticed my dedication, and my grades were excellent. But at home, even my academic success was somehow twisted to highlight Lisa's struggles. "See how easy it is for Sarah?" Mom would say to Lisa. "You just need to try harder, sweetie." But Lisa never had to try harder, because there were always excuses ready for why she couldn't succeed, and I was always there to pick up her slack. The day I graduated high school, everything changed. I had already accepted that college wasn't in my future. We weren't exactly rolling in money, and I figured any savings would go to Lisa's education. I'd been looking at job listings, planning to work at the local diner while taking some community college classes on the side. That evening, after all the graduation ceremonies were done, Mom and Dad called me into the living room. Lisa was sprawled on the couch as usual, playing on her phone. "Sarah, sit down," Dad said, his voice unusually serious. "We need to talk about your future." My stomach clenched. Here it comes, I thought. The lecture about responsibility, about helping the family, about putting my dreams on hold. Mom reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "We've been saving," she said, sliding it across the coffee table. "Ever since you were little." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a bank statement showing an account in my name with enough money for 4 years at state college. But I thought. I stammered, looking between them and the paper in my hands. "We can see how well you're doing," Mom explained, glancing briefly at Lisa, who was pretending not to listen. "And Lisa, well, college might not be in her future. We thought this money would be better spent on you." I was speechless. For the first time in my life, I was getting something that Lisa wasn't. It felt strange, almost wrong after all these years. "But," Dad added, his tone growing stern, "we need you to promise us something." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "When you finish college and get a good job, you'll help the family. Don't forget about your sister." "Of course," I said quickly, still stunned by this turn of events. "I promise." Lisa suddenly got up and stormed out of the room, slamming her door upstairs. Mom sighed but didn't follow her, a stark contrast to how they usually coddled her every mood. That fall, I packed my bags and headed to state college, 3 states away. The distance felt like freedom. For the first time in my life, I could open windows without worrying about anyone catching a cold. I could study without being interrupted to help with chores or watch Lisa. 2 months before graduation, I received an offer I couldn't refuse, a position at Anderson & Global, one of the most prestigious firms in the city. The salary was excellent, and the opportunity was too good to pass up. When I told my parents, they were surprisingly understanding about me not coming back home. I found a decent apartment not far from the office and settled into my new life. I kept in regular contact with my family, calling them every weekend. Our conversations usually centered around Lisa, how she was still finding herself after high school, not working, not in college, just existing. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't responsible for fixing that situation. 3 years into my job at Anderson & Global, Mom called with that tone in her voice, the one she always used when she wanted something. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my phone lit up with her name. "Sarah, honey," she began, her voice sweet as honey. "You know Lisa's been having such a hard time finding work." I closed my eyes, already knowing where this was going. "Your company is so successful," she continued. "Couldn't you put in a good word for your sister? Maybe get her a position there? She's very smart, you know that." My stomach twisted into knots. How could I explain that Lisa, who hadn't worked a day in her life and hadn't gone to college, wouldn't make it past the first round of applications at a firm like Anderson & Global? "Well," I said carefully, "we do have some openings. Let me send over the application form so Lisa can see what the requirements are." That evening, I forwarded the standard application form to Lisa's email. The requirements were crystal clear: bachelor's degree required, proficiency in SAP and Oracle systems, fluent in 2 foreign languages besides English, minimum 5 years of relevant experience preferred. After that, Mom stopped asking about getting Lisa a job at my company. Life went on. I worked hard, got promoted twice, and started building up a decent savings account. The thought of buying my own place began to take shape: no more rent, a place to truly call my own. 2 years later, I decided to visit home for the first time in months. The house looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling in places. Lisa was still living there, sprawled on the same couch, scrolling through her phone, just like when we were teenagers. Over dinner, I shared my plans. "I've been saving up," I said, pushing my peas around the plate. "I'm thinking about buying an apartment. The market's good right now, and with my credit score, I could get a decent mortgage rate." The table went quiet. Mom and Dad exchanged looks, while Lisa suddenly seemed very interested in her mashed potatoes. A week later, Mom called. Her voice was different this time, worried, almost desperate. "Sarah, honey, we need to talk," she began. "Your father's not doing well. His back is acting up again, and he can't take those extra shifts at work anymore." I listened as she listed their troubles: the leaking roof, outdated plumbing, walls that needed painting. Each problem came with a price tag attached. "We're barely making ends meet," she said, her voice cracking. "And after all we did for you, honey, the college money, giving you a chance at a good life. Now it's time for you to help your family, Sarah. We need you." There it was. The reminder of my debt to them, the obligation I'd promised to fulfill all those years ago. The dream of my own apartment seemed to fade with each word my mother spoke. After that phone call, I spent several sleepless nights thinking about my parents' situation. The guilt ate at me. Here I was, planning to buy an apartment while they couldn't even fix their leaking roof. Finally, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Mom back on a Sunday morning. "I've been thinking about what you said," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want to help. I'm going to give you access to my account. You can spend up to $1,500 per month. That should cover the repairs and help with the bills." The silence on the other end lasted so long, I thought we'd lost connection. Then Mom's voice came back, thick with emotion. "Sarah, that's so generous. It's such a large amount, we probably won't even need that much. Just enough for the basic repairs and some groceries." I walked her through setting up the access on her phone. "Just remember the limit," I reminded her. $1,500 per month. Of course, she assured me. "We'll be very careful with it." The first few months went smoothly. I was busy at work and barely checked the account activity, but when I did glance at it, I saw modest withdrawals: $700 here, $800 there. Mostly hardware stores, grocery shops, and utility payments. It seemed like they were being responsible with the money, just as Mom had promised. But then things started to change. The amounts began creeping up gradually: $900 one month, $1,100 the next. I tried not to worry about it. After all, they were still under the limit, and home repairs could be expensive. Then came the notification that changed everything. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed with an alert I'd set up for large purchases: $2,000 charge at Luxe Boutique. I nearly dropped my phone. That couldn't be right. As soon as the meeting ended, I pulled up my account details. There it was in black and white: a $2,000 purchase at one of the most expensive clothing stores in their area. I stared at the screen in disbelief. I'd never even shopped there myself. With my apartment savings goal, I couldn't justify spending that much on clothes. My hands were shaking as I dialed Mom's number. "Mom, I just got a notification about a $2,000 purchase at Luxe Boutique," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "What's going on?" There was a pause, then a nervous laugh. "Oh, that. Well, you know my birthday's coming up next month," she said, her voice unnaturally bright. I saw this absolutely gorgeous dress, and I thought, well, I've been feeling so down lately with all our troubles. I just wanted to treat myself a little. Okay, I said, wanting to avoid an argument. Just, please stick to the limit we agreed on. Of course, honey, she said quickly. Then added, by the way, I'm still looking forward to my birthday present from you. You haven't forgotten, have you? I sat there after hanging up, staring at the account activity on my screen. Something didn't feel right, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what. This wasn't just about a dress, this was about something else, something I wasn't seeing yet. From here I started checking my account more regularly, setting up detailed transaction alerts on my phone. What I saw made my stomach churn. The spending pattern was escalating at an alarming rate. Mom had blown past the $1,500 limit like it didn't exist. One month it was $2,000, then $2,500, and before I knew it, some months were hitting $4,000. My savings account, which I'd been nurturing for years with dreams of my own home, was shrinking instead of growing. One evening, after seeing yet another large transaction, I pulled up my account on my laptop and created a spreadsheet. The numbers were right there in black and white. In just a few months, they'd spent more than I had in an entire year. My own monthly expenses were modest: rent, utilities, groceries, and the occasional dinner out with colleagues. I drove a used car, bought my clothes on sale, and packed my lunch most days. Meanwhile, my parents were supposedly spending thousands on what exactly? I decided it was time for a visit. I needed to see these home improvements for myself. Mom, I said when I called her. I'm thinking of coming home next weekend. It'll be nice to celebrate your birthday in person, and I'd love to see that dress you bought. Plus, you can show me all the repairs you've done to the house. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Mom finally spoke, her voice had an edge I'd never heard before. Oh no, honey, don't come, she said quickly. I'm not really celebrating my birthday this year. I'm not feeling up to it. But Mom, I haven't been home in months, and I'd really like to see. No, she cut me off sharply, then immediately softened her tone. It's just not a good time, Sarah. But you can send my birthday gift by mail if you'd like. That call set off every alarm bell in my head. I spent the entire night going through 6 months of bank statements, line by line. The more I looked, the less sense it made. There were charges from stores I knew my mother would never shop at, restaurants that stayed open until 2 a.m., bars I'd never heard of. The home repair expenses were there, but they were tiny compared to everything else: $150 at Home Depot, $200 at a plumbing supply store. These were dwarfed by charges from high-end boutiques, jewelry stores, and electronics shops. Someone had bought a $1,200 smartphone last month. My mother still used the same flip phone she'd had for years, saying she didn't need anything fancy. The pattern started emerging like a picture coming into focus. Teenage bars, nightclubs, designer clothing stores, makeup shops, nail salons. These weren't the expenses of my aging parents who could barely make ends meet. These were the expenses of someone else entirely, someone young, someone who liked to party, someone who had expensive taste and no job of their own. Lisa. The realization hit me like a physical blow. All those times Mom had talked about the leaking roof and broken plumbing, all those guilt trips about helping the family, it had been a smokescreen. My supposedly struggling parents weren't using my money to repair their house. They were funding my sister's extravagant lifestyle. I felt sick to my stomach as I scrolled through transaction after transaction. A $300 spa day. A $500 shopping spree at a designer outlet. $200 bar tabs multiple times a week. This was why Mom didn't want me to visit. There were no major repairs to see, no improvements to show off. Just Lisa, living it up on my dime while I pinched pennies and put off my own dreams. I spent the next morning rehearsing what I would say, pacing my apartment with my phone in hand. Finally, around noon, I made the call. Mom, I said as soon as she answered, my voice steadier than I felt. We need to talk about where my money is really going. There was a long pause on the other end. What do you mean, honey? I think you know exactly what I mean. I took a deep breath. The bars, the designer clothes, the new smartphone, those aren't your expenses, are they? They're Lisa's. I heard her inhale sharply, then let out a long sigh. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. No more sweet talk, no more pretense. Well, what did you expect? She said defensively. We're family. Lisa needs nice things too. She can't help it if she hasn't found her path yet. Mom, you lied to me. You told me the money was for house repairs. We did use some of it for repairs, she interrupted. But Sarah, you have so much, and Lisa has so little. Besides, you owe us. Or have you forgotten who paid for your fancy college education? I almost laughed. I'd been expecting this, the ultimate guilt card. But I was prepared. Actually, Mom, I ran the numbers last night. Every single expense for the past 2 years. Would you like to know what I found? I pulled up my spreadsheet. In the past 24 months, you've spent $72,000 of my money. That's more than what you and Dad paid for my college tuition, plus interest. So no, I don't owe you anything anymore. The line went quiet. Then, without another word, Mom hung up. Almost on autopilot, I opened Facebook and typed in Lisa's name. I hadn't looked at her profile in months. I'd been too busy working, too focused on my own life. Now I scrolled through post after post, my anger growing with each swipe. There she was, posing in the $2,000 dress from Luxe Boutique, the one Mom had claimed was for her birthday. There was Lisa at some resort last month, lounging by a pool with a fancy cocktail. Photo after photo of parties, clubs, and restaurants I recognized from my bank statements. She was even wearing the expensive jewelry I'd unknowingly paid for, tagging herself at all the upscale places she'd visited with my money. I needed more information, so I called Aunt Marie, who had always been the family truth teller, the one person who never bought into the Lisa can do no wrong narrative. Aunt Marie, I need to ask you something, I said. Have you been to my parents' house lately? Have they done any repairs? She let out a bitter laugh. Repairs? The only thing that's changed is the house is getting worse. Your father won't even fix the broken step on the front porch. Why do you ask? I explained about the money I'd been sending, about the supposed repairs. With each word, Aunt Marie's sighs grew deeper. Oh, Sarah, she said finally. That money's not going to repairs. Lisa doesn't work, doesn't even look for jobs anymore. Just parties all the time. She paused. And now she's trying to drag my Jenny into that lifestyle too. Keeps inviting her to these wild parties, telling her how much fun it is to live free and easy. My stomach was already in knots, but what she said next made my blood run cold. There's something else you should know, Aunt Marie continued, her voice dropping. Jenny told me this in confidence, but you need to hear it. Lisa's been showing around a letter of recommendation supposedly from you. Says she interned at your company under your supervision. Jenny saw it, it has your signature and everything. Lisa's planning to use it to apply at Carlton Industries. The room started spinning. A forged letter of recommendation? With my signature? If Lisa got caught, and she would get caught, it wouldn't just be her reputation on the line. It would be mine, my company's. Everything I'd worked for could be destroyed. I hung up with Aunt Marie and immediately called Carlton Industries' HR department. My hands were shaking as I explained the situation. I need to report a fraudulent letter of recommendation, I said. My sister is applying for a position using a forged letter in my name. I never wrote it, never signed it, and she has never worked at my company. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, my phone exploded with calls from my parents. When I finally answered, Mom's screaming voice nearly burst my eardrums. How dare you sabotage your sister's career, she shrieked. She was about to get that job at Carlton Industries. Mom, she forged my signature. She was finally trying to make something of herself. Mom continued as if I hadn't spoken. And you ruined it. You've always been jealous of her. I heard shuffling, then Dad's voice came on the line, angrier than I'd ever heard him. Lisa's been crying for 2 days straight because of you, he growled. Is that what you wanted? To hurt your sister? Well, congratulations. You're no daughter of mine. Consider yourself disowned. Dad, she committed fraud. If you ever want us to forgive you, he cut me off, his voice cold and calculating, you'll need to start sending us more money. Much more than before. Maybe then, someday, we might consider forgiving you for what you've done to your sister. My father's words were the last straw. Years of manipulation, guilt, and unfairness crashed over me in that moment, and suddenly everything became crystal clear. No, I said firmly into the phone. I don't owe you anything anymore. I helped you selflessly, and you lied to me. If you need money so badly now, why don't you ask Lisa to help? She's the one you've been spending all that money on anyway. Before they could respond, I hung up. With shaking hands, I opened my banking app and permanently revoked my mother's access to my account. As I pressed the confirm button, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, and a new one settle in my stomach. I knew what was coming. The call started the next morning. How could you do this to us? Mom's voice screeched through my voicemail. After everything we've done for you. You selfish bitch, Lisa's message followed. You think you're so much better than everyone else with your fancy job and your perfect life. I deleted the messages without listening to the end. But they kept coming, day after day. Text messages, voicemails, emails, all filled with insults, guilt trips, and demands to restore their access to my money. Each one more desperate and angry than the last. I blocked their numbers, but they started calling from different phones. I blocked those too. A week into the barrage, Aunt Marie called. Sarah, honey, she said gently. I wanted to warn you, your parents are calling everyone in the family. They're telling everyone what a terrible daughter you are, how you abandoned them in their time of need. She paused. I know the truth, and so does Jenny. We've tried telling them they're wrong, but they won't listen. I just wanted you to know what they're doing. That was 3 months ago. Now, my life has settled into a new normal. My savings account is growing again. It's amazing how quickly money accumulates when it's not being drained by others. I've started seriously looking at apartments, going to viewings on weekends. Last week, I even met with a mortgage advisor. The calls have mostly stopped, though I still get the occasional message from a new number. I delete them without reading them now. Sometimes I wonder about my parents, if Dad's back is really getting worse, if Mom is still covering for Lisa's excesses. I wonder if Lisa ever tried to forge anyone else's signature, or if she's still living the high life on someone else's dime. But mostly, I focus on my own life. I work, I save, I spend time with friends who value me for who I am, not what I can give them. I'm learning to stop feeling guilty for taking care of myself first. Will I ever speak to my family again? I honestly don't know. Maybe someday things will be different. Maybe someday they'll understand what they did wrong, or I'll find it in my heart to forgive them even if they don't. But for now, I'm focused on building the life I want, one that isn't weighed down by guilt, obligation, or other people's expectations. My name is Jenna, and I grew up in what looked like the perfect family from the outside. We lived in a massive house in the wealthy part of town, complete with a pool and a 3-car garage that my father's luxury vehicles called home. My dad built his company from the ground up, turning it into a successful enterprise that provided us with everything we could ever want. And my mother, Diana? Well, she made sure everyone knew just how successful we were. Darling, I simply must have this new Gucci bag, I'd hear Mom say to Dad at least once a week. Everyone at the country club has one, and I can't possibly show up with last season's model again. Dad would just smile, pull out his credit card, and hand it over without a word. That's how it always went, Mom asking, Dad giving. She didn't work a day in her life, but she sure knew how to spend money. Every month brought new designer clothes, spa treatments, and trips to exotic resorts where she'd post endless photos on social media. Meanwhile, I spent most of my time with a rotating cast of nannies. We went through them like Mom went through handbags. None of them ever seemed good enough for her. I remember one nanny in particular, Miss Sarah. She was different from the others. She actually cared about me, not just her paycheck. She'd help me with my homework, read me stories, and even taught me how to bake cookies. But like all the others, she didn't last long. I caught her wearing one of my silk scarves, Mom announced one day, though I knew for a fact that Miss Sarah would never do such a thing. We simply can't have staff who don't know their place. I was 14 when everything changed. Dad had been working late more often than usual, trying to close a big deal. Mom was planning her next vacation to the Maldives, completely oblivious to the stress lines deepening on Dad's face. Then one night, the phone rang. I can still hear Mom's scream echoing through our marble hallways. Dad had collapsed at his office, a massive heart attack, they said. By the time the ambulance arrived, it was too late. Just like that, my father was gone, and our perfect world began to crumble. The funeral was a blur of black dresses and sympathetic murmurs. I stood there, numb, watching Mom put on a show for all the guests. She was the grieving widow, playing her part perfectly, but I could see the panic in her eyes. Not because she'd lost her husband, but because she was about to lose her lifestyle. The day Mom walked into Dad's office and sat in his chair, I knew we were doomed. She spun around in it a few times, straightened her designer blazer, and called all the department heads for a meeting. I watched from the doorway as she tried to channel her inner CEO, but all I saw was a desperate woman playing dress-up. I've learned everything about this business from my husband, she announced to the room full of skeptical faces. We're going to take this company to new heights. I wanted to scream. Dad hadn't taught her anything about business, she'd never shown any interest. The most involvement she'd had with the company was organizing the annual Christmas party. But now here she was, making grand proclamations about expansion plans and market strategies she clearly didn't understand. That night at dinner, she couldn't stop talking about her new role. Did you know, Jenna, that your father had all these complicated spreadsheets? Well, I've simplified everything. Who needs all those numbers when you have instinct? Mom, I tried to reason with her, maybe you should hire someone to help run things? Someone with experience? She waved her hand dismissively. Don't be silly, darling. I'm doing perfectly fine. You should hear how impressed everyone is with my natural business acumen. But they weren't impressed. Over the next few months, I watched as experienced employees started disappearing one by one. First went Dad's trusted CFO, then the operations manager, and soon even the junior staff were jumping ship. Meanwhile, I'd overhear whispered conversations about missed payments, canceled contracts, and mounting debts. Mom started taking money from the company accounts for her personal expenses, insisting she deserved it as the CEO. When I questioned her about it, she'd just pat my head and say, "You're too young to understand business, sweetie." Every family gathering became a stage for her delusions. The company's never been better, she'd boast to our relatives. I've modernized everything. James would be so proud. Dad would have been horrified. I was only 15, but even I could see we were heading for disaster. The final blow came just before my 16th birthday. The bankruptcy notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, right after Mom had ordered new office furniture for her expanding empire. We lost everything. The company was sold to pay the debts, but it wasn't enough. Our house went next. I watched as movers packed up our luxury furniture and Mom's designer wardrobe. We moved to a tiny house on the outskirts of town, the kind of place Mom used to drive past with her nose in the air. The only thing we had left was my college fund, money Dad had set aside in a protected trust that Mom couldn't touch. But that didn't stop her from trying. "Jenna, darling," she'd say, "voice honey sweet, you know we could use that money now. We can always figure out college later." "No, Mom. That's for my education. Her face would darken. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? By watching your mother struggle while you sit on a pile of money? She'd give me the silent treatment for days after these conversations, but I stood my ground. I'd seen how quickly she could burn through money, and I wasn't about to let her destroy my future too. The next 2 years dragged by in tension and cold shoulders. Mom and I barely spoke except to argue about money. When my high school graduation finally came around, she made it clear she wouldn't celebrate my achievement. "Why should I throw you a graduation party?" she said the morning of the ceremony, not looking up from her coffee cup. "You won't even help your own mother when she needs it." I'd already been accepted to Barrett University, a good school 3 states away. Mom didn't know it yet, but I'd chosen it specifically for the distance. As soon as the graduation ceremony ended, I told her my plans. "You're abandoning me?" she gasped, clutching her chest dramatically. "After everything?" "I'm not abandoning you, Mom. I'm going to college, like Dad wanted." The dorm room at Barrett was tiny compared to my old bedroom, but it felt like paradise. No more guilt trips, no more silent treatments, no more walking on eggshells. I stretched my dad's money as far as it would go, cheap meals, used textbooks, no spring break trips. Every holiday, I'd make the obligatory phone call home. "Hi Mom, how are you?" "Oh, surviving, barely," she'd say with a sigh. "Unlike some people, I don't have a trust fund to live off of." She never called me first. Not once in 4 years. But I didn't care, I was too busy building my own life. I graduated with honors, landed a job at Thompson & Associates, and found a small apartment in the city. Work became my focus, and I was good at it. Really good. Within 2 years, I'd been promoted twice. Then came that phone call. It was Christmas, and I was doing my usual check-in. "The heating's broken again," Mom complained. "I can barely afford groceries, let alone repairs. But don't worry about me, I'll just wear 3 sweaters and eat crackers." Something in me shifted. Maybe it was because I'd just gotten another raise, or maybe I was just tired of the guilt. But I heard myself say, "I'll come visit next week." I flew home with a plan. The house looked worse than I remembered, peeling paint, broken gutters, ancient carpet. Mom opened the door wearing that martyred expression I knew so well. "I'm doing well at work," I told her over coffee. "I'd like to help. I can give you $1,000 a month, and we can fix up the house a bit." Her eyes lit up like I hadn't seen in years. Within weeks, the house had fresh paint, new carpets, and working heat. Our new routine started slowly. Mom would call with an invitation to dinner, her voice warm and enthusiastic. "Jenna, sweetie, I was thinking we could try that new Italian place on Mason Street. Nothing fancy, just a nice family dinner. I've invited Aunt Carol and Uncle Pete." These dinners became our thing. Mom would pick modest restaurants, places where the entrees didn't break $30 and the wine list fit on 1 page. Sometimes it was just us, other times she'd invite her sister Carol, or her old friend Martha, or Uncle Pete. The bill usually came to around $200, which I always picked up without hesitation. I still remember the first time Mom bragged about me at one of these dinners. We were at Luigi's, a cozy family-owned place with checkered tablecloths and candles stuck in Chianti bottles. "Did I tell you," Mom announced to Aunt Carol, beaming with pride, "that Jenna just landed the Anderson account? The biggest client in her firm's history. My daughter's a real powerhouse in the business world. Takes after her father that way." It felt good. Different from the way she used to brag about me as a child, when I was just another accessory in her perfect life. This time, she was genuinely proud of what I'd accomplished on my own. The dinners became more frequent. Mom would call every couple of weeks, suggesting new places she'd heard about. Never anything extravagant, she seemed to understand the unspoken boundary there. She'd invite different combinations of relatives and friends, small groups who were always grateful and never presumptuous. Meanwhile, my career continued to flourish. I closed bigger deals, earned larger bonuses, and finally had enough saved for a down payment on my own place. The mortgage was substantial, but manageable with my salary. Mom came to my housewarming party, and for once, she didn't make any comments about the size or location. She just hugged me and said, "You've done so well, sweetie." When I upgraded to a new car, it felt natural to give Mom my old one. It was still in great condition, a 5-year-old Lexus that I'd maintained meticulously. Her ancient Honda was on its last legs anyway. The car was just the beginning. I noticed her ancient dial-up internet connection during one visit and immediately arranged for high-speed fiber installation. Then I started covering her utility bills when I realized she was keeping the house too cold in winter to save money. The real turning point came when I planned my first business trip to New York. Mom had always wanted to see Broadway, so I invited her along. Then Aunt Carol mentioned she'd never been to New York either, and before I knew it, I was booking tickets for 3. They were perfect travel companions, excited but not demanding. They were happy with comfortable mid-range hotels and authentic local diners. We walked everywhere instead of taking taxis, and they spent hours in Central Park, just people watching. That first trip set a precedent. Whenever I had to travel for work, Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, I'd bring Mom and 1 or 2 relatives along. They'd entertain themselves while I was in meetings, we'd meet for dinner, and on my free days, we'd explore together. They never asked for shopping sprees or expensive shows, though I'd occasionally surprise them with tickets to a musical or a nice dinner cruise. It felt like I was finally getting to know my real mother, the person she might have been if money hadn't warped her perspective so badly all those years ago. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing contracts at work. Mom's voice had that special excitement I'd grown to recognize over the years. "Jenna, honey, I've been thinking about my birthday next month. You know I'm turning 55, right?" "Of course, Mom. I was planning to come down for it. Did you want to do something special?" "Oh, yes, I want to celebrate properly this time. It's a big milestone, after all." I immediately started planning. "How about a nice dinner at your place? We could invite the usual crowd, Aunt Carol, Uncle Pete, Martha. I could hire a caterer, or we could order from that Italian place you love." "Oh no, darling," she cut me off. "Don't worry about any of that. I want to arrange everything myself this time. You've done so much for me lately, let me handle my own birthday celebration." Something in her tone should have warned me, but I was just happy to see her taking initiative. "Are you sure?" "I really don't mind helping." "Absolutely positive. Just show up at 7. I'll text you the restaurant address." When the day came, I flew in early and checked into my usual hotel. Mom had texted me an address I didn't recognize, but I didn't think much of it until my taxi pulled up at Le Chateau, the most expensive restaurant in the city. The kind of place where the menu doesn't list prices and you need reservations months in advance. The headwaiter led me through the main dining room, past the crystal chandeliers and gold-leafed walls, to a massive private section in the back. My heart stopped. There, spread across several tables draped in pristine white linen, sat at least 30 people, every relative we had, plus what looked like half of Mom's social circle. "Jenna." Mom rushed forward, tears gleaming in her eyes. She wrapped me in a tight hug that smelled of her favorite expensive perfume. "I'm so happy you're here." Stunned, I let myself be led to a seat. Aunt Carol reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're such a wonderful daughter," she gushed. "Your mother couldn't stop talking about how you insisted on throwing her this amazing party. The foie gras is divine, and I hear the Wagyu beef is coming up next." The room seemed to spin as realization hit me. Mom hadn't just arranged her own birthday party, she'd arranged an extravagant celebration that she expected me to pay for, without even telling me about it. My stomach churned as I watched plate after plate of obscenely expensive food arrive at the tables. Waiters glided between guests, pouring $500 bottles of wine like it was tap water. I spotted Japanese Wagyu beef that I knew cost $400 per serving, imported caviar, whole lobsters flown in from Maine. A quick mental calculation made me dizzy. $8,000, at least. Maybe more. Aunt Carol stood up, champagne flute in hand, gently tapping it with her silver spoon. The crystal ring echoed through the private dining room as conversations died down. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced, her face glowing. "To my wonderful niece, Jenna. Your generosity tonight shows just what an amazing daughter you are. The way you've taken care of your mother, and now this incredible celebration." "I'm sorry," I cut in, my voice shaking slightly. "But I need to stop you right there." The room fell silent. Mom's smile froze on her face. "I didn't arrange this dinner," I continued, looking around the room. "I didn't choose this restaurant. I didn't authorize any of these expenses. In fact, this is the first I'm hearing about any of it." Gasps rippled through the gathering. Someone's fork clattered against their plate. "Jenna," Mom hissed, her face reddening. "Don't be ridiculous. Of course you're paying for this. Who else would?" I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the marble floor. "No, Mom, I'm not. I offered to host a nice dinner at your house or order from your favorite Italian place. You said you wanted to handle everything yourself. You never mentioned Le Chateau or inviting 30 people. But you always pay," she sputtered. "You've been paying for everything. For reasonable things, normal restaurants, basic bills. Not this." I gestured at the extravagant spread. "I don't owe you a blank check." "You ungrateful." Mom's voice cracked. "After everything I've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You mean like trying to spend my college fund? Or running Dad's company into the ground?" The silence in the room was deafening. I reached into my purse and pulled out my wallet, counting out $200. "This covers my pork chop and glass of wine," I said, placing the bills on the crisp white tablecloth. "Good luck with the rest." I walked out without looking back, my heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown. Nobody called after me. Nobody tried to stop me. The night air hit my face like a slap as I emerged onto the street. I hailed the first taxi I saw and directed it to my hotel. As soon as I reached my room, I turned off my phone. I knew it would start ringing soon enough, angry calls from Mom, disappointed messages from relatives, demands for explanations. But for now, I just needed silence. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, hands shaking, and watched the city lights twinkle through the window. For the first time in years, I felt truly alone, and strangely, wonderfully free. The next morning, my phone nearly exploded when I turned it on. The notifications kept coming: 47 missed calls from Mom, 28 from Aunt Carol, 15 from Uncle Pete, dozens more from various relatives. The voicemail was full. I took a deep breath and called Mom. She picked up on the first ring. "Mom, I'm sorry about how things went down last night," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm coming over now. We need to talk about what happened at the restaurant." I genuinely thought she might meet me halfway. That maybe, just maybe, she'd realize how inappropriate it was to arrange such an extravagant party on someone else's dime without even asking them. I couldn't have been more wrong. "How dare you!" Her shriek was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "You selfish, narcissistic, ungrateful thing. Do you have any idea what you've done? Mom, if you just told me about. You completely humiliated me. In front of everyone. Do you know what happened after you stormed out like a spoiled brat? Everyone had to chip in $400 each to cover the bill. $400. The total came to $12,000, $12,000. And you, with all your money, couldn't even be bothered to pay for your own mother's birthday. You greedy bastard." My head spun. $12,000. They'd ordered even more after I'd left. "You think I'm greedy, Mom? Fine. I'll show you greedy." I hung up mid-rant. My hands weren't shaking anymore. Instead, a cold clarity settled over me as I opened my laptop. First, I logged into my bank account and canceled the automatic monthly transfer of $1,000 to her account. Next, I called the car dealership where I'd purchased my old Lexus. "Hi, this is Jenna Mitchell. I need to arrange for a vehicle retrieval. The car is still in my name." 20 minutes later, a tow truck was on its way to Mom's house. I pulled up the internet service provider's website. 3 clicks and her high-speed connection was scheduled for disconnection. Finally, I opened my social media account and started typing. "Important announcement for my family members, effective immediately, I will no longer be financing any trips or travel expenses for my mother or relatives. Any previous arrangements are cancelled. Please make your own travel plans going forward." I hit post and closed my laptop. It felt like closing a chapter of my life. The fallout was nuclear. Within hours of my social media post, my notifications exploded with comments from relatives who, just days before, had been more than happy to enjoy my generosity. "How could you do this to your own mother?" Aunt Carol wrote. "After everything she's sacrificed for you. You're nothing but a selfish, money-obsessed ingrate." Uncle Pete, who'd traveled with us to San Francisco just 2 months earlier, chimed in, "Your father would be ashamed of what you've become. Is this how he raised you? To abandon family?" The comments kept coming, each one more venomous than the last. My cousin Rachel, who I'd helped move into her new apartment just last year, posted, "Don't bother showing up at my wedding in September. I don't want someone so heartless at my special day." Aunt Carol followed up with another blow, "And you can forget about my 60th anniversary party next month. We don't need your money or your presents." It was fascinating, really, watching how quickly they forgot all the dinners, all the trips, all the times I'd picked up the check without a second thought. Now I was the villain in their story, the greedy daughter who'd cut off her poor mother. None of them mentioned the $12,000 dinner bill they'd been forced to split. None of them questioned why Mom had invited 30 people to a restaurant where entrees started at $300 without discussing it with the person she expected to pay. In their version of events, that part didn't matter. The first few weeks were the hardest. I threw myself into work, took on extra projects, anything to keep my mind occupied. My phone kept buzzing with messages from unknown numbers, relatives, trying to reach me through different phones after I'd blocked them. I changed my number. Some nights, I'd lie awake wondering if I'd done the right thing. But then I'd remember all the times Mom had manipulated me, all the guilt trips, all the endless demands, disguised as love. The birthday dinner wasn't an isolated incident, it was just the most blatant example of a pattern that had been there all along. 2 months after the restaurant incident, Mom tried to reach out. She used her neighbor's phone to leave a voicemail. "Jenna, honey, can we talk? I miss you. Things have been difficult. Maybe we could meet for coffee? Just us?" Her voice sounded smaller somehow, less certain. Part of me wanted to believe she'd changed, that she'd finally understood. But then I noticed she still hadn't apologized. There was no acknowledgement of what she'd done, no taking responsibility. Just another attempt to reel me back in. I blocked that number too. Life went on. I got another promotion at work. Without the constant drain of supporting Mom and various relatives, my salary stretched further than I'd ever imagined. I took a trip to Europe, alone this time, no relatives to entertain, no one's demands to accommodate. It was liberating. Sometimes, through mutual acquaintances or social media, I hear bits and pieces about Mom's life. She had to downsize again, move to an even smaller place. She complains to anyone who'll listen about her ungrateful daughter who abandoned her. The relatives all sympathize, of course, but interestingly, none of them have offered to support her the way I did. Do I miss having a mother? Sometimes. But I miss the mother I needed, not the one I had. I miss the idea of family, but not the reality of what my family had become, a network of users all too happy to take everything I could give and then condemn me when I finally said enough. Maybe someday Mom will have a real epiphany. Maybe she'll understand that love shouldn't come with a price tag, that family isn't about financial transactions. Maybe she'll offer a genuine apology, not the kind that comes with excuses or demands, but one that shows true understanding of the hurt she's caused. If that day comes, I might be open to rebuilding some kind of relationship. A different one, with clear boundaries and mutual respect. But even then, I'll never go back to being the family ATM. That chapter of my life is closed forever. My earliest memories are filled with the sound of shouting. Dad's voice would boom through our small house, making the walls seem to shake. Mom would try to keep her voice down, probably thinking of me and my baby sister Lillian, but sometimes she couldn't help but shout back. I was 7 then, and Lillian was just too young to really understand what was happening. I remember watching Mom brush Lillian's hair one morning, singing softly to her. That was the last time I saw her do that. Later that day, the shouting started again, worse than ever before. "You're impossible, Robert," Mom's voice cracked. "You control everything I do, everyone I talk to." The divorce happened fast after that. One day Mom was just gone. Dad told us she'd left us, that she'd chosen alcohol and other men over her own daughters. I was old enough to feel confused and betrayed, but young enough to believe him completely. It wasn't long before Dad brought Sarah home. She was younger than Mom, always smiling, and she clearly adored Lillian. My baby sister took to her immediately, calling her mommy within weeks. But I couldn't do it. Every time Sarah tried to hug me, or do my hair the way Mom used to, I'd pull away. "Chloe," Dad would say sternly, "Sarah is trying her best. You need to be more grateful." But how could I be grateful? I still had a mom, a real one, somewhere out there. Where was she? Why didn't she call? Why didn't she fight to see us? These questions haunted me through my childhood, but I learned to keep them to myself. Sarah doted on Lillian, buying her pretty dresses and taking her to dance classes. I was invited too, but I always refused. I threw myself into books instead, spending hours in my room studying. It was easier than watching my sister build a relationship with my replacement mother. Years passed this way, with Lillian becoming more and more Sarah's daughter while I remained stubbornly on the outside. But I had a plan. I studied hard, knowing that education would be my ticket to freedom. While Lillian was being groomed to be the perfect daughter, I was plotting my escape through college applications and scholarship essays. Finally, at 18, I was free. College felt like breathing fresh air after being underwater for too long. My dorm room might have been tiny, but it was mine, no Sarah hovering, no dad dictating rules, no constant reminder of being the difficult daughter. I still came home during breaks, trying to maintain some connection with Lillian. During one of these visits, in my final year, I found her in her room, which looked like a princess's chamber, all pink and white, courtesy of Sarah's decorating obsession. "So, what are your plans after graduation?" I asked, settling into her window seat. "Have you thought about which colleges you might want to apply to?" Lillian was sprawled across her bed, perfectly manicured nails tapping away at her phone screen. "Oh, I'm not going to college," she said, as casually as if she were discussing the weather. "I'm getting married." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Married? You're not even 18 yet." "When did this happen?" "Sarah introduced me to Marcus last year." She finally looked up from her phone, her eyes sparkling. "His family owns that big real estate company downtown, you know, Preston Properties? They're loaded, Chloe. And he's absolutely perfect." "But what about your dreams? You used to talk about becoming a teacher," I reminded her, thinking of the little chalkboard she'd had as a kid. Lillian waved her hand dismissively. "That was just kid stuff. Sarah says I don't need college anyway. She believes a woman's real purpose is to create a family and have children. Why waste time with degrees when I can start my real life now?" I gripped my coffee mug tighter, fighting the urge to launch into a lecture about feminism and independence. "Just think carefully about what you really want, Lil. Not what Sarah wants, not what Marcus wants. What do you want? I know what I want, she rolled her eyes. Not everyone needs to be a career woman like you. The way she said it, like being a career woman was some kind of character flaw, made my stomach twist. But I stayed quiet. After all, it was her life to live. After graduation, I found a nice apartment across town and started working as a remote accountant. The job wasn't glamorous, but it paid well enough and gave me the independence I craved. Meanwhile, Lillian married Marcus in a lavish ceremony that Sarah orchestrated down to the last crystal champagne flute. Within a year, my baby sister was a mother herself, with little James arriving right on schedule. A year later came Emma. That's when my peaceful life started unraveling. The first time Lillian showed up unannounced, she was wearing designer workout clothes that probably cost more than my monthly rent, carrying 2 baby bags and looking perfectly put together despite supposedly being an exhausted new mom. I have a spa appointment, she announced, already setting the bags down in my living room. You'll watch them, right? Thanks, sis. James just ate, and Emma might need a diaper change soon. Oh, and James likes his stuffed elephant for nap time, it's in the blue bag somewhere. Before I could even process what was happening, she was gone, leaving me with a toddler and an infant. This became a regular occurrence. Lillian would appear with some urgent appointment, lunch date, or shopping trip, dropping the kids off like they were packages to be delivered. The real shock came when she and Marcus decided to take a romantic getaway. No warning, no asking, they just showed up at my door with the kids and enough supplies for 3 days. The constant interruptions were driving me insane. My work as an accountant required focus and attention to detail, something nearly impossible to maintain with 2 small children running around. Every time I'd settle into a spreadsheet, there'd be a cry, a crash, or Auntie Chloe, I'm hungry. I tried working early mornings before Lillian's surprise visits, late nights after the kids went home, weekends when I should have been relaxing. But it wasn't enough. My boss had started noticing errors in my work, small mistakes that could have serious consequences. Why don't you ask Sarah and Dad to watch them sometimes? I suggested one day as Lillian dropped off the kids for the 3rd time that week. Or maybe Marcus's parents? Dad's always at work, Lillian replied, already halfway out the door. And Sarah says the noise gives her migraines. Besides, you're so good with them. I watched her walk away in her perfectly pressed designer outfit, not a hair out of place, and fought back the urge to scream. She couldn't handle them alone all day, but somehow I was supposed to handle them while working a full-time job? The breaking point came on a Tuesday. I had a crucial deadline, and James was particularly energetic that day. I'd turned away from my laptop for just a moment to stop Emma from eating a crayon when I heard the thud. James had been jumping on the couch, something I'd told him not to do countless times, and had fallen off. He seemed fine at first, but by the time Lillian came to pick them up, an angry purple bruise had spread across his shin. The moment she saw it, she exploded. What the hell, Chloe, she screamed, making both kids start crying. I trust you with my children, and this is how you watch them. He could have been seriously hurt. Maybe if you actually watched your own kids, I started, but she cut me off. I knew I shouldn't have left them with you. You're so irresponsible. What were you doing, too busy with your precious spreadsheets, to keep my son safe? Something in me snapped. Years of resentment, of being taken for granted, of being expected to put my life on hold for everyone else's convenience, it all came pouring out. Get out, I said, my voice deadly quiet. Take your kids and get out of my apartment. Excuse me? I'm done being your free babysitter. I have a job, Lillian. A real job that pays my bills. I can't keep dropping everything because you need a spa day or lunch with your friends. Hire a professional babysitter. I practically pushed them into the hallway, ignoring Lillian's shocked expression and the kids' confused tears. The moment the door closed, my phone started ringing. Dad. What the hell do you think you're doing? He roared before I could even say hello. Your sister is crying her eyes out. How dare you treat her this way? If she doesn't like how I watch her kids, she can watch them herself, I shot back. You will apologize to your sister immediately. This kind of behavior is unacceptable. Unacceptable? What's unacceptable is dumping your kids on someone without warning and then getting mad when they can't provide professional childcare while working full-time. Listen here, young lady, his voice dropped to that dangerous tone I remembered from childhood. If you don't start showing more respect to your sister and treating your family better, you can forget about your inheritance. I'll leave everything to Lillian. After this threat, I knew I needed to handle things differently. The constant tension wasn't good for anyone, especially the kids. So I swallowed my pride and called Lillian. Hey, I said when she answered, my voice carefully neutral. Can we talk? I was going to call you actually, she replied, sounding surprisingly calm. I might have overreacted a bit yesterday. We met for coffee at a neutral location, the small cafe halfway between our apartments. Lillian looked tired, the perfectly put-together facade slightly cracked. Look, I started, stirring my latte. I love James and Emma, you know I do. But I can't keep dropping everything at a moment's notice. I need to be able to plan my work schedule. Lillian nodded slowly. I get it. I guess I've been taking advantage a bit. We worked out a system. She'd give me at least 24 hours notice before bringing the kids over. No more doorstep drop-offs, no more surprise weekend stays. We'd stick to a regular schedule, Tuesday afternoons and Thursday mornings, when I could properly plan my workload around childcare. Things improved after that. The kids still came over, but on a predictable schedule that let me arrange my work accordingly. I even started enjoying our time together more, now that it wasn't forced on me. As Christmas approached, I made plans with my college friends for a ski trip in the mountains. It would be my first real vacation in ages, no work, no family drama, just snow and freedom. When I heard Lillian was planning a family trip to Europe, I figured it was perfect timing. Surely a family vacation meant the whole family, kids included. 2 days before my departure, I stopped by Lillian's house with Christmas presents for the kids. The living room was chaos, suitcases everywhere, clothes laid out on every surface. Dad and Sarah were there too, Sarah directing the packing like a general organizing troops. These are so cute, Lillian exclaimed as the kids tore into their early presents. They can play with them while staying at your place during Christmas. I froze, my coffee cup halfway to my lips. What? Oh, it's going to be amazing, Lillian continued, apparently oblivious to my shock. Marcus's college friends are joining us in Paris, and then we're hitting the ski slopes in Switzerland. No kids allowed, it'll be just like old times. I'm leaving for a ski trip tonight, I said slowly. With my friends. I've had these plans for months. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. I watched my father's face turn that familiar shade of red that always preceded an explosion. I couldn't care less about your plans, he spat, standing up from his armchair. When are you going to grow up and realize that family comes first? Looking after your sister's children is your responsibility. My responsibility? I echoed, incredulous. Since when is it my responsibility to be their full-time babysitter? Sarah stepped forward, her face a mask of disapproval I'd grown all too familiar with over the years. Chloe, you can't just put your selfish desires above family plans. What were you thinking, making vacation arrangements without consulting any of us? That's not how family works. I let out a harsh laugh. Consulting you? That's rich. Did any of you consult me before planning your European vacation? Did anyone even think to ask if I was available to watch the kids? We shouldn't have to ask, Lillian chimed in, bouncing Emma on her hip. You're their aunt. Then why don't you ask their grandmother? I gestured toward Sarah. She's family too, isn't she? Sarah's perfectly maintained expression cracked slightly. Don't be ridiculous. I can't possibly watch them, it's far too demanding at my age. Besides, she smoothed her designer blouse, your father and I are going on the trip too. Of course you are, I muttered. So everyone gets a vacation except me? That's enough, Dad roared, making Emma start crying. I've had it with your attitude, young lady. You've been difficult since you were a child, but this is the last straw. If you can't put family first, then maybe you don't deserve to be part of this family's future. The inheritance will go entirely to Lillian, every last penny. Something snapped inside me. Years of manipulation, of being the family doormat, of having my life treated as less important than everyone else's, it all came rushing to the surface. You know what? Keep your damn inheritance, I shouted, grabbing my coat. I'm done being threatened. I'm done being manipulated. You all can go straight to hell. The door slammed behind me with satisfying force. My hands were shaking as I drove home, but I felt lighter somehow, like I'd finally broken free of invisible chains. I threw myself into packing and left to meet my friends, turning off my phone as we headed toward the mountains. It wasn't until I was settled in our cozy cabin that evening that I thought to check the security camera feed I'd installed after one too many surprise visits from Lillian. They had been there, all of them, Dad pounding on my door, Sarah trying to peer through the peephole, Lillian bouncing a crying Emma while James sat on the floor playing with his toy cars. They had stayed for hours, alternating between pleading and threatening, clearly unable to process that I'd actually chosen myself over their demands for once. My phone buzzed constantly during the first day of vacation. I had muted all their notifications, but I could still see the numbers climbing: 27 missed calls from Dad, 43 from Lillian, 15 from Sarah. The voicemails and messages piled up, each more desperate than the last. If you don't call back right now, young lady, Dad's voice thundered through one message I accidentally played before deleting. Sarah's texts were a masterclass in guilt tripping. I've never seen the children so upset. How could you abandon your own family at Christmas? Your poor sister is devastated. Is this really the kind of person you want to be? Lillian's video messages were the worst, her perfectly made-up face streaked with tears, Emma crying in the background. Please, Chloe. We can't find anyone else on such short notice. I'll pay you double what I usually do. I turned my phone off completely after that. My friends noticed my tension and suggested we hit the slopes early. The bite of cold air and the rush of skiing helped clear my head. 3 days into our trip, my cousin Rachel texted, "Just heard what happened." Don't worry too much, Sarah finally found someone through her country club friends to watch the kids. Some retired teacher or something. She's charging them a fortune though. Guess professional childcare isn't so cheap after all. I couldn't help but smile at that. They'd finally had to face the reality of what their constant demands had been costing me. When I returned home a week later, my social media notifications were exploding. Dad had made a public post, complete with old family photos of him with Lillian and me as children. It pains me to write this, but today I officially disown my eldest daughter, Chloe. She has betrayed not only me but our entire family, abandoning her sister and young niece and nephew at Christmas to pursue her own selfish desires. A true daughter would never put her own wishes above her family's needs. From this day forward, all my property and assets will go to my younger daughter Lillian, who understands the true meaning of family loyalty. Chloe is no longer welcome in our home or our lives. The post had hundreds of reactions, mostly from Dad's business associates and church friends offering sympathy and condemning my selfishness. Sarah had shared it with additional commentary about ungrateful children and modern values destroying family bonds. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then closed the app without liking, commenting, or sharing. Let them have their public meltdown. I had work to do, and for the first time in years, a quiet apartment all to myself. A week after Dad's dramatic social media announcement, I received a message that made my heart stop. The notification simply read, "Catherine Mitchell wants to connect with you." My mother's name appearing on my screen like a ghost from the past. Her message was long, carefully worded. "Chloe, I saw your father's post. I know it's been many years, and I have so much to explain. Would you be willing to meet with me? I understand if you don't want to, but please know that I've never stopped thinking about you and Lillian. My hand shook as I read the rest. She'd been following our lives through social media all these years: my college graduation, Lillian's wedding, the birth of my niece and nephew. She'd been there, watching from a distance, unable to reach out. I agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe across town. Walking in, I spotted her immediately. She looked older than in my memories, of course, but her eyes were the same. When she hugged me, I caught the faintest whiff of the lavender perfume she used to wear when I was little. "I'm so sorry, Chloe," she said as we sat down. "I know an apology can't make up for all these years, but you need to know the truth." The story she told made me feel sick. Dad had been systematically keeping her away from us, all while painting himself as the victim. He'd send her photos and videos of us with Sarah, birthday parties, school events, family vacations, along with messages about how happy we were with our real mother. "Look how well they're doing," he'd write. "Sarah is such a wonderful mother to them. They don't even remember you anymore. Why would you want to disrupt their lives now?" She pulled out her phone, showing me years of messages from Dad, each one more manipulative than the last. "The girls call Sarah Mom now. It would only confuse them if you tried to come back into their lives. Chloe's doing so well in school. Sarah helps her with all her homework. She's forgotten all about you." Lillian asked why she doesn't look like her mommy Sarah. We told her she takes after her daddy. She's so happy with that answer. Don't ruin it for her. But the biggest revelation was about money. Mom had been sending substantial alimony payments all these years, thanks to her successful career as a corporate lawyer and her marriage to a wealthy businessman. "Your father and I had an agreement," she said, stirring her untouched coffee. "All the alimony I paid for you was supposed to be given to you when you turned 18. It was enough to buy you a small apartment, give you a start in life. He promised me he'd tell you about it." I thought about all the times Dad had dangled his inheritance over my head, using it to control me. All those years, he'd been threatening to withhold money that wasn't even his to begin with, money that had come from the mother he'd told me had abandoned us. That night, I sat at my computer, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Then I started typing. In response to my father's recent post about disowning me, I feel compelled to share some truths that have recently come to light. For years, I believed what my father told me about my mother, that she abandoned us, that she didn't want us, that she chose alcohol and other men over her daughters. I believed him when he said we were better off without her. Today, I learned that every word was a lie. My mother never abandoned us. She was pushed away by a man who used manipulation and lies to maintain control over his daughters. While he painted himself as our savior, he was secretly receiving substantial alimony payments from our mother, money that was meant to be given to me when I turned 18. Instead, he held this money over my head for years, threatening to withhold his inheritance if I didn't comply with his demands. He sent our mother photos and videos of us with our stepmother, telling her we were happier without her, that we'd forgotten her, that we called another woman mom. He convinced her that reaching out would harm us psychologically. All while she watched us grow up from a distance, sending money she thought would secure my future. To my father, "Keep your money. I don't want an inheritance built on lies. I don't want anything from a man who could so cruelly separate children from their mother for his own benefit." To those who commented on his post about family loyalty, "You don't know the whole story. You never did." The responses came flooding in immediately. Relatives I hadn't heard from in years expressed their shock and disgust. Old family friends reached out with stories of their own about Dad's controlling behavior. Several of Dad's business associates quietly unfriended him. Dad's message came late that night: "Chloe, you've misunderstood everything. I was only trying to protect you girls. If you'll let me explain." I blocked him without reading the rest. Sarah tried calling next, then Lillian. I blocked them too. It hurt to cut off my sister, but watching her turn into a mirror image of our father hurt more. Her sense of entitlement, her manipulation, her absolute certainty that she was always right, she'd learned well from him. Mom helped me find an apartment in her neighborhood, insisting on buying it outright. Now, 6 months later, we have dinner together 3 times a week. She tells me stories about my early childhood, fills in the blank spaces in my memory. Sometimes we look through her old photos, ones I'd never seen before, of her holding me as a baby, teaching me to walk, reading to me and Lillian. "Do you think you'll ever speak to Lillian again?" Mom asked me recently. I thought about my sister, about how thoroughly Dad had shaped her into his image. "Maybe someday," I said. "If she ever learns to think for herself." But I'm not holding my breath. For now, I'm focused on rebuilding my relationship with my mother, making up for all those lost years. I'm learning that family isn't about obligation or control or threats. It's about love, respect, and truth, qualities I never found in my father's house, but discover every day with my mom. Sometimes I still get messages from flying monkeys, Dad's friends, church members, distant relatives who think I should forgive and forget. I delete them all. I've spent enough years living under the weight of other people's expectations. I'm finally free. I remember the day everything changed like it was yesterday. I was just 9 years old, sitting at our kitchen table, when Mom and Dad sat down with serious faces I'd never seen before. Dad reached for my hand, his own trembling slightly. "Amber, sweetheart," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to tell you something important." That was the day we learned about the cancer. I didn't fully understand what it meant then, but I understood enough to know that my world was about to turn upside down. For the next 2 years, our cozy house became a revolving door of doctors, relatives, and well-wishers. I watched my father, once strong and vibrant, slowly fade away. Mom tried to keep things normal, but nothing was normal anymore. She'd force smiles during the day, but at night, I'd hear her crying in their bedroom. I'd sit outside their door, wanting to go in, but not knowing what to say. When Dad passed away, I was 11. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and hushed voices. Mom held my hand so tight it hurt, but I didn't mind. I thought we'd get through it together. I was wrong. A week after the funeral, Mom sat me down again, this time alone. "Amber, I've been talking to your grandmother," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I think it would be best if you stayed with her for a little while. Just until I can get things sorted out." "But why can't I stay here with you?" I asked, my voice small. "I need some time alone, honey, to process everything, to figure out how to move forward." She tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, but the gesture felt hollow. "It'll just be for a few months." Grandma Margaret, Dad's mother, picked me up the next day. She didn't say much during the drive to her house, but I could see her knuckles white on the steering wheel. When we arrived at her modest 2-story home, she helped me carry my bags to the guest room. Over the next few months, Mom would call every few weeks. The conversations always followed the same pattern. "When can I come home, Mom?" "Just be patient, sweetie. Just a little longer." "But I miss you." "I miss you too. But this is better for now. You understand, right?" I didn't understand. Neither did Grandma, though she never said it outright. She'd just press her lips together whenever Mom called, her disapproval clear in the way she'd busy herself in the kitchen, banging pots and pans a little louder than necessary. Grandma made sure I never felt unwanted. She'd cook my favorite meals, help me with homework, and tell me stories about Dad when he was young. But no matter how comfortable I was at Grandma's, it wasn't home. I kept waiting for Mom to come back for me, to want me again. After 6 months at Grandma's, Mom finally came for me. I was doing homework at the kitchen table when I heard a car pull up outside. Through the window, I saw Mom step out of an unfamiliar blue sedan. A man I'd never seen before stayed in the driver's seat. "Amber," Mom burst through the door, more animated than I'd seen her since Dad died. Her hair was styled, her makeup fresh, and she was wearing a new dress. "I've got wonderful news." Grandma appeared from the living room, arms crossed. "Sarah, this is unexpected." "Mom, Amber, I want you to meet someone special." Mom was practically bouncing. Well, he's waiting in the car. He's a bit shy about coming in, but. She grabbed my hands. Amber, honey, I'm getting married. His name is Robert, he's absolutely wonderful. A successful businessman, and he has 2 daughters about your age. You'll have sisters, isn't that exciting? I looked at Grandma, whose face had turned to stone. Sarah, Grandma's voice was careful, measured. Don't you think this is a bit sudden? Oh, Margaret, when you meet him, you'll understand. He's perfect for us. Amber, he's going to be such a wonderful stepfather to you. And his girls, Emma and Lisa, they're 9 and 10. Their mother passed away 3 years ago, and Robert's raised them alone. We're going to be one big, happy family. I peered out the window at the man in the car. He was staring straight ahead, not even glancing toward the house. Come on, Amber, Mom said, already gathering my things. Let's go home. The girls are waiting to meet you. The drive home was filled with Mom's chatter about Robert, the wedding plans, and how perfect everything would be. When we pulled up to our house, the house Dad and Mom had bought together, 2 girls were sitting on the front steps. They looked like matching dolls, with their identical blonde hair and pink dresses. Girls, Mom called out, waving. Come meet Amber. I stepped forward, trying to smile. Hi, I'm. We know who you are, the taller one, Emma, cut me off. Her voice was sweet as honey, but her eyes were cold. Our dad told us all about you. Yeah, Lisa, the younger one, chimed in. But just so you know, he's not going to be your dad. He's our dad. And your mom is going to be our new mom, Emma added with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We're going to be one big happy family. Right, Sarah? Of course, sweetie, Mom beamed, completely missing the tension. 3 months later, I stood in front of a mirror in a plain blue dress while Emma and Lisa twirled around in matching pink bridesmaid gowns. The wedding was about to start, and I could still hear the echoes of their screaming from earlier. We won't wear the same dress as her, they'd shrieked when Mom suggested matching dresses for all 3 of us. She's not even really part of the family. In the official wedding photos, I'm barely visible, thanks to Emma and Lisa strategically positioning themselves to block me out. As I stared at those photos later, I realized this wasn't going to be the happy family Mom had promised. Life in our blended family quickly settled into a routine. Robert wasn't cruel, he just acted like I was invisible. He'd come home from work, hug Emma and Lisa, kiss Mom, and walk right past me as if I were a piece of furniture. Mom, desperate to prove her devotion to her new husband, showered his daughters with attention while barely sparing a glance my way. The first Christmas after the wedding made it crystal clear where I stood. Emma and Lisa each got new iPads and designer clothes, while I received a basic phone and some discount store sweaters. Thank God for Grandma Margaret. She never forgot me. For my 13th birthday, she gave me a beautiful silver locket with Dad's picture inside. Emma spotted it around my neck at dinner. That's so pretty, she said, eyes gleaming. You should share it with me. That's what sisters do. When I refused, I found the locket's chain mysteriously broken the next day. Another time, Grandma sent me a limited edition set of art supplies. I loved drawing, just like Dad had. A week later, I found my sketchbook soaked in water and the expensive pencil snapped in half. When I confronted Lisa, she just smiled. Prove it was me, she said sweetly. Mom, I tried showing her the ruined supplies. Look what they did. Amber, stop being dramatic, Mom sighed. You probably left them out in the rain yourself. Stop trying to blame your sisters for everything. Then, when I turned 15, Mom dropped another bombshell. She was pregnant. The house exploded with excitement, everyone except me, that is. Robert's daughter squealed about having a baby brother or sister, while I sat quietly, already knowing what this would mean. The baby, a boy they named Michael, arrived in spring. 3 weeks after Mom came home from the hospital, they called a family meeting in the living room. Now that Michael's here, Mom began, not quite meeting my eyes, we need to make some changes to the sleeping arrangements. Robert cleared his throat. We think it would be best if you moved in with Emma and Lisa. Michael needs his own room. No, the word came out before I could stop it. I'm not sharing a room with them. This is my room. This is my father's house. The room went silent. What did you say? Mom whispered. Dad bought this house, I continued, my voice growing stronger. He paid for it. You and your daughters moved into our house, and now you want to take my room away? Robert's face turned red. Emma and Lisa sat with their mouths open, for once speechless. How dare you? Mom's voice shook. How can you be so selfish? After everything we've done for you? Tears started rolling down her cheeks. Robert has been nothing but good to you, and this is how you repay us? Good to me? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. He doesn't even look at me. After that, the house became even more of a prison. Nobody spoke to me at meals. Mom and Robert acted like I wasn't there, and Emma and Lisa didn't even bother with their usual taunts, they just pretended I was invisible. The silence was somehow worse than their cruelty had been. After 3 days of complete silence in the house, I couldn't take it anymore. I picked up my phone and called the one person who had never let me down. When Grandma's car pulled into the driveway, I saw Mom and Robert watching from the kitchen window. As I walked out with my backpack, they didn't try to stop me. If anything, they looked relieved. Life at Grandma's felt like being able to breathe again after years of holding my breath. We fell into an easy routine, breakfast together every morning, homework at the kitchen table while she baked, long talks about Dad and what he was like at my age. 2 months passed quickly. Then one morning, Grandma sat me down with her serious face on. Amber, I need to tell you something, she said, taking my hands in hers. I've been talking to your mother. She's willing to give up her parental rights. And I want to adopt you, officially. I stared at her, hardly daring to believe it. Really? Really, it's your choice, of course. But I want you to know that this has always been your home, and I would be honored to be your legal guardian. Tears welled up in my eyes as I hugged her. Yes, please, yes. The legal process was surprisingly smooth. Mom signed the papers without hesitation. The only thing left was to get my remaining belongings from the house. When I went back, no one was home. I found all my things packed in boxes in the garage, covered in dust. My old room had been completely transformed into a nursery for Michael, painted blue with clouds on the ceiling. I loaded my boxes into Grandma's car without saying goodbye. They hadn't bothered to say goodbye to me, after all. High school was different now. Emma and Lisa still attended the same school, but we existed in parallel universes. We'd pass each other in the hallways without a glance, like strangers who had never shared a home. Sometimes I'd hear them laughing with their friends, talking about family vacations or weekend plans, but it was like listening to a radio station playing in another room, distant and disconnected from my reality. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make something of myself. Grandma supported me every step of the way, helping me with college applications and encouraging me to aim high. The day my acceptance letter arrived from State University, along with a partial scholarship offer, Grandma was more excited than I'd ever seen her. I have something to tell you, she said that evening. I've been saving for your college fund since the day your father died. I wanted to make sure you'd have options. The amount she had saved left me speechless. With the scholarship covering most of my tuition, we decided together to save most of the money for my future. I'd need it someday for grad school, or maybe to start my own life after college. Those first few years of college were transformative. I called Grandma every Sunday, visited during holidays, and finally felt like I was building my own life. My mother, Robert, and their perfect little family became distant memories, like characters in a story I'd read long ago. The call came during my final semester of senior year. Amber, Grandma's voice was weaker than I'd ever heard it. The doctors found something. I started making the trip home every weekend after that. Each time, Grandma seemed a little frilier, a little more tired. But she never lost her spirit. "Don't you dare skip any classes for me," she'd insist, even as the hospital machines beeped around her. "I didn't save all that money for your education just for you to play nursemaid to an old woman." When graduation day came, Grandma was too weak to attend. The nurses helped prop her up in her hospital bed, and we set up her smartphone so she could watch the live stream. After I crossed the stage and got my diploma, I looked directly into the camera and blew her a kiss. Later, she told me she'd cried through the whole ceremony. I went straight from graduation to the hospital. For the next week, I barely left her side. We talked about everything and nothing, memories of Dad, her childhood stories, her hopes for my future. Then one quiet morning, while I was holding her hand, she slipped away peacefully in her sleep. Planning the funeral felt surreal. I was choosing flowers and making arrangements in the same house where Grandma and I had shared breakfast just weeks ago. Then, on the day of the service, I saw them. My mother, Robert, Emma, Lisa, and a young boy I barely recognized as my half-brother Michael walked into the funeral home. 7 years had changed them. Emma and Lisa were now grown women, and Michael, who I'd last seen as a baby, was now a grade schooler in a small black suit. The ceremony passed in a blur. I stood alone by the casket, accepting condolences from distant relatives and Grandma's friends. Then suddenly, Mom was there. "Amber," she said softly, her eyes red from crying. "I'm so sorry for your loss." "Margaret, she was a wonderful woman." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "Listen," Mom continued, twisting her hands together nervously, "I know it's been a long time, but would you consider coming to dinner with us? All of us? We'd like to try to make things right." Looking at her face, lined now with age and grief, I felt the weight of all our unsaid words. "I'll think about it," I managed to say. A week later, after meeting with Grandma's lawyer and learning she'd left me everything, the house, her savings, all of it, I made my decision. Maybe it was time to face the past. The house I'd grown up in looked smaller somehow, shabbier. The paint was peeling, the garden overgrown. Inside, Robert, Emma, Lisa, and Michael were waiting around the dining room table. The awkward silence was broken only by the clinking of silverware against plates. "So," Mom finally said, forcing brightness into her voice, "what are your plans now that you've graduated?" I took a slow sip of water before answering. "I'm staying in town, actually. Going to live in Grandma's house." The flash of satisfaction in Mom's eyes was quick, but I caught it. Something about that look made me uneasy, though I couldn't say why. My degree in business administration landed me a position as a junior executive at Wilson & Associates. The salary was more than I'd ever dreamed of making right out of college, and with no rent to pay thanks to Grandma's house, I was able to save a good portion of my earnings. Mom started dropping by regularly, usually with fresh-baked cookies or a casserole. At first, our conversations were awkward, filled with long pauses and careful words. But gradually, she began opening up about their struggles. The heating bill was so high this month, she'd sigh, or Michael's growing so fast, he needs new shoes again. The first time I offered help, it was almost automatic. Mom was talking about a leaky faucet they couldn't afford to fix. "I have some extra cash," I said, pulling out $200. "Here, get it fixed." The way her face lit up made something warm stir in my chest. After that, it became a regular thing, small amounts here and there for whatever crisis they were facing that week. Then, surprisingly, Emma and Lisa started coming around too. They told me about their jobs, Emma as a receptionist, Lisa working retail, and their struggles to make ends meet. It was strange hearing them talk without any trace of their old meanness. When Mom mentioned that Michael needed a laptop for school, I didn't hesitate. The smile on his face when I gave it to him made all our past history seem distant and unimportant. "You're the best big sister ever," he said, hugging me. It was our first real hug. The real breakthrough came during my business trip to New York. When Emma and Lisa asked if they could tag along, I was hesitant at first, but their excitement was contagious. "We've never been anywhere," Lisa admitted. "Dad always said we couldn't afford it." I booked them economy tickets and found a decent tourist-class hotel in Manhattan. Watching them experience New York for the first time was like seeing the city through new eyes. They took pictures of everything, gasped at the height of the skyscrapers, and couldn't stop talking about how amazing it all was. During our dinner at a small Italian restaurant in Little Italy, Emma raised her glass of house wine. "To family," she said, and for the first time, the word didn't feel wrong. Back home, our regular dinners became a tradition. Mom, Emma, and Lisa would always insist on choosing budget-friendly restaurants, and they never ordered anything expensive. They seemed genuinely grateful for everything, no matter how small. Mom's call came on a Tuesday afternoon, just like any other. I was reviewing work documents when my phone lit up with her name. "Hi, sweetie," her voice was warm, familiar. "How are you doing?" We chatted about nothing in particular, Michael's school performance, Emma's new haircut, the usual family gossip. Then, just as we were wrapping up, she added, "Oh, by the way, honey. I hate to ask, but could you maybe transfer $200? The car needs some minor repairs." "Sure, Mom. I'll send it right now." "You're an angel, Amber. I love you so much." I was about to hang up when I realized the call hadn't ended. There was rustling on the other end, then voices growing clearer. Mom must have thought she'd pressed the end button. Did she fall for it? That was Emma's voice, followed by a laugh I hadn't heard since high school, sharp, mocking. Of course she did. Mom's voice had changed completely, dripping with contempt. She always does. Little Miss Successful with her fancy job and her inherited house. God, I'm so tired of pretending to like her, Lisa groaned. Did you see what she was wearing at dinner last week? That awful blazer? She thinks she's so much better than us just because she went to college. They all laughed, Mom, Emma, and Lisa. Then I heard Robert's voice join in. "You're doing great, honey," he told Mom. "Keep it small for now. We don't want to spook her." I know, Mom replied. "We have to play it smart. Small amounts here and there, build up her trust. Once she completely lets her guard down, then we can really start asking for more. She's loaded now, that house, her savings, her salary. We just need to make sure she spends it on us, instead of herself." "It's not fair," Emma whined. "Why should she have all that money? We deserve it more than she does." "Of course you do, sweetheart," Mom said. "You and Lisa are twice the daughters she ever was. Don't worry, we'll get what's ours. She's too stupid to see what's really going on. Always was, just like her father." I ended the call with a single press of my finger, but their laughter kept echoing in my ears. The family I thought I'd finally found had never existed. It had all been an elaborate performance, with me playing the role of the foolish benefactor. The next morning, Mom's number flashed on my phone screen. "Amber, honey. We're having a special family dinner tonight. You'll come, won't you?" I heard the false sweetness in her voice now, the calculated warmth that I'd been too desperate to recognize before. "Sure, Mom. What time?" 7 o'clock. Everyone will be there." When I arrived at the house, they were all waiting. Mom had made my favorite lasagna. Emma and Lisa were dressed up, playing their roles perfectly. Even Michael seemed to have been coached to be extra affectionate. "Amber," Mom rushed to hug me. "You look tired, sweetie. Work keeping you busy?" I returned her hug mechanically, noting how she exchanged quick glances with Robert. Throughout dinner, they kept up their performance, asking about my job, laughing at each other's jokes, playing the perfect family. I watched them like I was seeing a play, noticing every forced smile, every calculated gesture. Finally, as we were finishing dessert, Mom cleared her throat. "Amber, honey, we actually wanted to talk to you about something important." She reached for Robert's hand, their practiced move for serious conversations. The house, Well, we've had some structural issues come up. The foundation needs urgent repairs. We've gotten estimates, Robert added, trying to sound fatherly. It's going to cost about $10,000. Mom leaned forward, her eyes wide and hopeful. We hate to ask, but since you're doing so well. I smiled, and I saw Mom's face light up with triumph. She thought she had me. No. The word fell into the silence like a stone into still water. What? Mom's smile faltered. I said no. Not 10,000, not $10. Not another cent. Emma and Lisa exchanged confused looks. Robert sat up straighter. But honey, Mom started, we really need. You forgot to hang up the phone yesterday, Mom. I kept my voice calm, almost conversational. After you asked for that $200. The color drained from her face. Emma and Lisa froze. Even Michael, who probably didn't understand what was happening, stopped eating his cake. I heard everything, I continued. About how tired you are of pretending to like me. About how you've been playing me for money. About how you think I'm stupid, just like my father. I turned to Emma and Lisa. About how you deserve my money more than I do. We were just joking, Lisa burst out. It wasn't serious. Amber, sweetie, Mom reached for my hand. I pulled it away. You're misunderstanding. The only thing I misunderstood was thinking you had changed. I stood up from the table. But you know what? I should thank you. You've finally shown me who you really are, and now I can stop wasting my time trying to build a relationship with people who see me as nothing but an ATM. I walked out of that house for the last time, ignoring their calls behind me. But of course, they didn't give up easily. The calls started that night, first Mom, then Robert, then the sisters. Voicemails, text messages, emails, all begging forgiveness, claiming it was just a joke, that I was overreacting. When I blocked their numbers, they started showing up at my house, knocking on my door at all hours. I knew I needed a clean break. The next morning, I walked into my boss's office. Janet, remember when you mentioned expanding the New York office? 2 weeks later, I had a transfer approval in hand. I listed Grandma's house with a realtor, and it sold quickly, the market was good, and it was in a prime location. I found a beautiful apartment in Manhattan's Upper West Side, with big windows and a view of the park that would have made Grandma smile. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I think about them, Mom, Robert, Emma, Lisa, and little Michael. I hope Michael grows up to be different from them. But I don't regret my decision. I learned that family isn't about blood or legal documents. It's about love, real love, not the kind that comes with price tags and hidden fees.